Hey, ambitious souls! Tonight's story brings you into the glass towers of Manhattan, where a billionaire alpha commands both Wall Street and the shadows that lurk beneath. When he encounters a woman whose intellect cuts sharper than any blade and whose spirit refuses to bow, his carefully constructed empire of secrets begins to crack. In this world of power lunches and midnight hunts, desire becomes the most dangerous game of all. Chapter 1. Empire of Steel. The 42nd floor of Steel Industries pierced the Manhattan skyline like a blade of obsidian and chrome. Inside the corner office that commanded views of Central Park and the Hudson River, Damien Steele stood motionless before floor-to-ceiling windows, his reflection a dark silhouette against the city's glittering expanse. At 34, he was the youngest CEO to ever grace the cover of Forbes 3 times running. What the magazine didn't know, what no human knew, was that his empire hadn't been built on luck or even genius alone. It had been forged with the primal instincts of an alpha werewolf who could scent deception across a boardroom and hear heartbeats skip when rivals lied. "Sir?" His assistant's voice crackled through the intercom, pulling him from his predatory stillness. "Ms. Rivera is here for the 10 o'clock. Damien's nostrils flared almost imperceptibly. Even through the steel and glass barrier, he could detect something different about today's appointment. Something that made his wolf stir restlessly beneath his perfectly tailored Armani suit. "Send her in, Marcus." The doors to his office were solid mahogany, imported from ancient forests and weighing nearly 200 pounds each. Most visitors were intimidated by the sheer effort required to open them, a psychological tactic Damien employed ruthlessly. But when the doors swung open with confident precision, he found himself turning from the window with genuine interest. Isabella Rivera strode into his domain like she owned it. 5'7" in heels that added another 3 inches, she moved with the fluid grace of a dancer and the purpose of a warrior. Her midnight black hair was pulled back in a severe chignon that emphasized the sharp intelligence in her dark eyes, and her burgundy suit, clearly designer but not ostentatious, hugged curves that made his wolf take immediate notice. But it wasn't her beauty that made Damien's pulse quicken. It was the complete absence of fear in her bearing. "Mr. Steele." Her voice was whiskey smooth with just a hint of her Puerto Rican heritage warming the edges. She didn't wait for permission to sit, simply chose the leather chair directly across from his desk and crossed her legs with elegant efficiency. "Thank you for seeing me." Damien moved to his chair with a controlled fluidity that had made more than one business rival compare him to a stalking panther. "Ms. Rivera, I'll admit, your proposal intrigued me enough to clear 20 minutes from my schedule. That's more time than I've given the mayor this month." A smile ghosted across her lips. Not the simpering expression he was used to from women seeking his attention, but something sharper. More dangerous. "I'm honored. Though I should mention, 20 minutes won't be nearly enough." His eyebrows rose a fraction. In 15 years of building his empire, no one had ever told Damien Steele that his time wasn't sufficient. Bold words from someone seeking a favor. "I'm not seeking anything, Mr. Steele. I'm offering you an opportunity." Isabella opened the leather portfolio she'd carried in and placed a single document on the polished surface of his desk. "Rivera Analytics has identified a pattern in your company's overseas investments. Specifically, a hemorrhage that's been bleeding you dry for the past 18 months. Damien's wolf went completely still. The board members who knew about the Southeast Asian losses could be counted on one hand, and each had signed NDAs backed by penalties that would bankrupt most small nations. "I'm not sure what you think you know. I know that Steel Industries has lost approximately $47 million to a shell company based in Singapore." Isabella leaned forward slightly, and Damien caught her scent, jasmine and vanilla underscored by something wild and untamed that made his canines ache to extend. "I know that your head of international development, Michael Chen, has been funneling funds through a series of carefully constructed dummy corporations. And I know that you've suspected for months, but haven't been able to prove it because Chun is your beta's younger brother." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Damien's hands, resting flat on his desk, didn't move, but Isabella could swear she saw something predatory flash behind his steel gray eyes. "Careful, Ms. Rivera." His voice carried a warning that most humans would have felt in their bones, an Alpha's displeasure that could make grown men break into cold sweats. You're making accusations that could be considered slanderous. Isabella's pulse should have been racing. Every survival instinct she possessed should have been screaming at her to back down, to apologize, to run. Instead, she felt an answering wildness rise in her chest, something that whispered this man was more dangerous and more fascinating than anyone she'd ever encountered. "I'm stating facts," she replied evenly. "Facts that I can prove beyond any shadow of doubt. The question is whether you want to hear them or whether you'd prefer to keep bleeding money to maintain pack loyalty." The words hung in the air between them like a loaded weapon. Damien's stillness was absolute now, every muscle locked in place as his mind raced through the implications of what she'd just said. Pack loyalty. She'd used the exact phrase, not corporate loyalty, not family loyalty, but pack loyalty. Either it was an incredible coincidence, or Isabella Rivera knew far more than any human should. 27 minutes, he said finally, his voice dropping to a register that seemed to vibrate through the floor-to-ceiling windows. "That's how long we've been talking. In that time, you've accused one of my senior executives of embezzlement, demonstrated knowledge of confidential financial information, and used terminology that suggests you know things about my organization that could be problematic." Isabella met his stare without flinching. "Are you threatening me, Mr. Steele?" "I'm trying to understand you." Damien rose from his chair and moved around the desk with deliberate slowness. "In my experience, people who know my business this intimately fall into 3 categories: allies, enemies, or prey. Which are you, Ms. Rivera?" She stood as well, refusing to let him tower over her, and suddenly they were less than 2 feet apart. This close, Damien could see the gold flecks in her dark eyes, could count the barely perceptible freckles across the bridge of her nose. This close, his wolf was nearly growling with want. "I'm the woman who's going to save your empire," Isabella said softly. "The question is whether you're smart enough to let me." For a heartbeat that stretched into eternity, they stood locked in a battle of wills that had nothing to do with business and everything to do with the primal recognition crackling between them. Then Damien's phone buzzed with an incoming call, shattering the moment. "Mr. Steele?" Marcus's voice was tight with urgency. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but you need to take this. It's Tokyo. They're saying something about irregularities in the Nakamura merger." Damien's jaw clenched. The Nakamura deal was worth $200 million and had been 18 months in the making. If there were problems now, "Take a message," he said without breaking eye contact with Isabella. "Sir, they say it's urgent. Something about documents that don't match the originals." Isabella tilted her head slightly, and Damien caught the faintest hint of satisfaction in her expression. $47 million in Southeast Asia," she murmured. "But that was just the appetizer. The Nakamura merger is where Chin planned to really cash in." Damien's hand shot out faster than human reflexes should have allowed, catching Isabella's wrist in a grip that was firm but carefully controlled. "What do you know about Nakamura?" "Everything." Her pulse was steady beneath his fingers, betraying no fear even as she stood in the grip of a man who could snap her bones without effort. "I know that Chin has been feeding information to Nakamura's competitors. I know that there's a bidding war happening behind your back. And I know that if you take that call right now, you're going to lose the biggest deal in your company's history." "Sir?" Marcus's voice was growing more insistent. "They're saying they need to speak with you immediately, or they're prepared to walk." Damien's grip on Isabella's wrist tightened almost imperceptibly. "You have 30 seconds to convince me not to take that call." Isabella stepped closer, close enough that her breath whispered across his throat. "Because the man on that phone isn't from Nakamura Industries. He's from Zhao Corp, and he's calling to tell you that they've matched your offer plus 10%. Chin sold you out 3 days ago." The phone fell silent. Marcus's voice came through the intercom one more time, smaller now and tinged with confusion. "Sir?" The line went dead. They hung up. Damien released Isabella's wrist and stepped back, his mind calculating at superhuman speed. If she was right, if Chun had orchestrated this level of betrayal, then the Nakamura merger was dead. $47 million was only the beginning of his losses, and his pack was being torn apart from the inside by someone he'd trusted implicitly. If she was wrong, he'd just lost $200 million by refusing to take a phone call. "Prove it," he said simply. Isabella smiled, and this time there was nothing soft or diplomatic about the expression. It was the smile of a predator who'd just cornered her prey. "I thought you'd never ask." She moved back to her chair and opened her portfolio fully, revealing not just documents but photographs, financial records, and what appeared to be surveillance equipment. "Michael Chun has been systematically dismantling your empire for the past 18 months. But he's not working alone." "What do you mean?" "I mean there's another alpha involved. Someone who's been studying your operation, learning your weaknesses, and positioning himself to take over not just your business empire, but your pack." Isabella spread the photographs across his desk like playing cards. "Someone who knows enough about werewolf politics to understand that destroying your financial base is the first step to challenging your dominance." Damien's wolf snarled silently as he recognized faces in the photographs: pack members, business associates, people he'd trusted with his life. "Who?" "Marcus Blackwood of Blackwood Enterprises. Your biggest rival in the corporate world, and as of 6 months ago, the alpha of the Manhattan Shadow Pack." The name hit Damien like a physical blow. Marcus Blackwood had been circling Steele Industries for years, making offers, attempting hostile takeovers, poaching key employees. But if he was also a werewolf, if he'd been playing a longer, more dangerous game than simple corporate competition, then everything changed. "How do you know about pack politics?" Damien's voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried the full weight of an alpha's authority. "What are you?" Isabella met his gaze steadily. "I'm the daughter of Eduardo Rivera, the man who used to run analytics for the Council of Alphas before he was murdered 6 months ago. I'm the woman who spent her entire adult life learning how to track supernatural predators through their financial footprints." She leaned back in her chair, projecting calm confidence even as she delivered the bombshell that would change everything. "And as of right now, I'm the only person standing between you and the complete destruction of everything you've built." The office fell into absolute silence. Outside, Manhattan hummed with its usual chaos of traffic and human ambition. Inside, 2 apex predators studied each other across a divide that had nothing to do with the mahogany desk between them and everything to do with the secrets that could destroy them both. Finally, Damien spoke. "What do you want?" "Partnership. Full access to your financial records, your business operations, and your pack structure. In return, I'll give you Marcus Blackwood's head on a silver platter and save your empire." Isabella stood and smoothed her skirt with practiced elegance. "You have until midnight to decide." "And if I refuse?" Isabella paused at the massive doors, her hand on the handle. When she looked back, her eyes held depths that seemed to harbor their own shadows. "Then by this time tomorrow, you'll be just another former billionaire with a story about how you lost everything to a rival you never saw coming." The doors closed behind her with the finality of a tomb sealing shut, leaving Damien alone with the photographs scattered across his desk and the growing certainty that Isabella Rivera was either his salvation or his doom. His phone buzzed with an incoming text. Marcus's name appeared on the screen, but the message made Damien's blood run cold. Chapter 2. Midnight Negotiations. The elevator to Damien's penthouse required a private key and rose 60 floors without stopping. At 11:47 p.m., it carried Isabella Rivera into a world few humans had ever seen, the private domain of Manhattan's most dangerous alpha. She'd changed from her business suit into something that walked the razor's edge between professional and predatory, a black dress that hugged her curves like liquid shadow, paired with heels that could double as weapons. Her hair fell loose around her shoulders now, and she carried herself with the fluid confidence of someone who knew exactly how lethal she could be. The penthouse doors opened to reveal Damien waiting for her. He'd shed his corporate armor as well. The Armani suit was gone, replaced by dark jeans and a black cashmere sweater that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders and the predatory grace of his movements. His steel-gray eyes tracked her every step as she entered his sanctuary. "You came," he said, closing the doors behind her with a soft click that seemed to echo through the space. "Did you think I wouldn't?" Isabella's gaze swept the penthouse, floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city, furniture that screamed understated luxury, and artwork that probably cost more than most people's houses. But what caught her attention were the subtle details: reinforced glass, multiple exit points, and the faint scent of wolf that lingered in every corner. I consider the possibility that midnight was chosen for dramatic effect rather than practical necessity. Damien moved to a bar that appeared to be carved from a single piece of black marble. Drink. Bourbon. Neat. Isabella settled onto a leather sofa that probably cost more than her car, crossing her legs with deliberate elegance. But first, tell me about the text you received this afternoon. Damien's hand paused in the act of pouring. You know about that? I know Marcus Blackwood sent you a message at 4:23 p.m. I know it referenced a hunt beginning at dawn. And I know it made you angry enough that you dismissed your entire senior staff 30 minutes early and spent the evening making phone calls to people whose numbers aren't listed in any corporate directory. You've been watching me. It wasn't a question. I've been protecting my investment. Isabella accepted the crystal tumbler he offered, their fingers brushing in the exchange. The contact sent electricity racing up her arm, a reaction she quickly suppressed. You represent my best chance at taking down the people who killed my father. I'm not about to let Blackwood eliminate you before I get that chance. Damien settled into the chair across from her, studying her face in the soft lighting. Tell me about your father. For the first time since entering his office that morning, Isabella's composure flickered. Pain flashed across her features before she locked it away behind professional detachment. Eduardo Rivera was the best supernatural financial analyst in North America. The Council of Alphas consulted him when they needed to track rogue packs through their economic footprints. He could follow money trails through shell companies, offshore accounts, and supernatural territories that most investigators couldn't even identify. And Blackwood killed him for it. Blackwood killed him because he was getting close to something bigger than pack politics or territorial disputes. Isabella took a sip of bourbon, letting the burn ground her before continuing. My father discovered evidence of a conspiracy, multiple alpha packs working together to destabilize established territories through economic warfare. Blackwood was just one piece of a much larger puzzle. Damien's wolf stirred uneasily. Interpack cooperation was rare, and when it did happen, it usually meant something catastrophic was brewing. What kind of conspiracy? The kind that aims to overthrow the Council of Alphas and replace the current supernatural power structure with something new. Something controlled by a very small group of extremely powerful wolves. Isabella set down her drink and leaned forward, her dark eyes intense. Tell me, Damien, how many business rivals have you faced in the past 2 years who seemed to know your moves before you made them? The question hit home with uncomfortable accuracy. Damien's jaw tightened as he mentally cataloged the deals that had gone wrong, the negotiations where opponents had been prepared for strategies he'd never used before, the uncanny way some competitors seemed to anticipate his every move. 7, he admitted finally. 7 major deals where it felt like I was playing poker with marked cards. 7 companies, all connected to Alpha-owned enterprises, all feeding information back to a central source. Isabella reached for her purse and withdrew a tablet, swiping through screens of financial data. Your pack isn't the only one being systematically weakened. In the past 18 months, I've identified 12 major Alpha-owned businesses that have suffered significant losses due to what appeared to be bad luck or market forces. She handed him the tablet, and Damien's expression darkened as he recognized names and companies, rivals he'd respected, allies he'd trusted, alphas whose territories bordered his own. They're eliminating competition, he murmured, scrolling through the data. They're consolidating power. Create chaos, weaken your enemy's financial base, then move in with offers that look like salvation but are actually surrender terms. Isabella reclaimed the tablet and closed it with a soft snap. The question is, are you going to let them add Steel Industries to that list, or are you going to fight back? Before Damien could respond, his phone buzzed with an incoming call. The display showed a number he recognized, Jason Chen, his head of security and Michael's older brother. Take it, Isabella said quietly. But put it on speaker. Damien's eyes narrowed. You know what this is about. I know everything about tonight, Damien. The only question is whether you trust me enough to let me help. After a moment's hesitation, Damien answered the call and activated the speaker function. Jason. Boss, we have a problem. Jason's voice was tight with stress. Someone broke into Michael's apartment tonight. Professional job, no signs of forced entry, but the place was tossed. And Michael? A pause. Michael's missing. Isabella watched Damien's face carefully as he processed this information. She could see the moment his protective instincts warred with his growing suspicion of his beta's brother. When did you last speak with him? Damien asked. 3 days ago. He said he was taking a long weekend, maybe driving up to the cabin upstate. But boss, his car's still in the parking garage, and his credit cards haven't been used since Tuesday. Any sign of a struggle in the apartment? That's the weird part. Nothing was broken, no blood, no evidence of violence. But his laptop's gone, along with all his financial files, and what looked like several months' worth of bank statements. Jason's voice dropped lower. Boss, there's something else. I found a business card wedged under his couch cushions. Blackwood Enterprises. The line went quiet except for the faint sound of traffic from Jason's end. Where are you now? Damien asked finally. Outside Michael's building. I've got 2 of the pack boys with me, and we've been canvassing the neighborhood. Nobody saw anything, nobody heard anything. It's like he just vanished. Isabella caught Damien's attention and mouthed a single word, trap. Damien nodded almost imperceptibly. Jason, I want you and your team to pull back. Return to the office and secure all financial records, everything Michael had access to in the past 6 months. Boss, shouldn't we? That's an order. Damien's voice carried the full weight of Alpha Command. Michael Chun is no longer your brother. He's a security threat, and until we know the extent of his betrayal, everyone who worked with him is potentially compromised. The silence on the other end stretched long enough that Isabella wondered if Jason would challenge the order. Finally, understood. We'll be at the office in 20 minutes. After Damien ended the call, Isabella spoke quietly. He's not missing. He's been extracted. By Blackwood. By Blackwood's cleanup crew. Michael served his purpose. He fed information about your operations, identified vulnerabilities in your financial structure, and helped orchestrate the deals that weakened your position. Now that you're onto him, he's become a liability. Damien rose and moved to the windows, staring out at the city lights as his mind worked through the implications. If Michael's been eliminated, then Blackwood knows we're aware of the betrayal, which means the timeline just accelerated. Isabella joined him at the window, close enough that he could smell her perfume mixed with something wilder underneath, something that made his wolf pace restlessly. The hunt he referenced in his text isn't scheduled for dawn. It's happening now. As if summoned by her words, Damien's phone rang again. This time the caller ID simply read, unknown. He glanced at Isabella, who nodded grimly. Answer it. Damien. He didn't bother with pleasantries. Good evening, old friend. Marcus Blackwood's voice was cultured, smooth, and carried the subtle undertones of an alpha used to absolute obedience. I trust you've had an eventful day. Cut to the point, Marcus.
So direct.
I suppose that's what I've always admired about you, your complete inability to appreciate subtlety. A soft chuckle. I'm calling to make you an offer. A generous one, considering the circumstances. I'm listening. Steel Industries is hemorrhaging money and credibility. Your pack is questioning your leadership. Your most trusted advisors have been feeding me information for over a year. Marcus's tone remained conversational, almost friendly. I'm prepared to offer you a way out that allows you to maintain some dignity. Damien's free hand clenched into a fist. What kind of way out? Sell me controlling interest in Steel Industries for $1. Publicly announce your retirement from business and your intention to relocate somewhere far from New York. In return, I'll ensure your pack members are treated well in the transition, and you'll be allowed to leave the city with your life and a modest financial settlement. And if I refuse? Then tomorrow morning, The financial press will receive detailed documentation of your company's illegal overseas investments, your connections to several unsolved disappearances, and evidence of your involvement in what they'll call the largest corporate embezzlement scheme in Wall Street history. Marcus paused. Of course, none of that will matter much once the Council of Alphas receives proof that you've been using your corporate resources to fund challenges against established pack territories. Isabella stepped closer to Damien, her presence somehow steadying even as his world crumbled around him. Ask him about Michael, she whispered. Where's Michael Chen? Damien asked.
Safe. For now.
Whether he remains that way depends entirely on your decision. The threat was delivered with casual indifference, but Damien heard the steel underneath. You have until sunrise to consider my offer. After that, I'm afraid the terms become significantly less generous. The line went dead. Damien stood motionless for a long moment, staring at the phone in his hand. When he finally looked at Isabella, she saw something in his expression that hadn't been there before, not fear, but the cold, calculating fury of a predator who'd been backed into a corner. He has everything, Damien said quietly. Financial records, pack information, council connections. Enough to destroy me completely. No, Isabella said firmly. He has what Michael gave him, plus whatever he's been able to piece together from 18 months of observation. But he doesn't have everything. What do you mean? Isabella moved to her purse and withdrew a small device that looked like a cross between a flash drive and a military-grade encryption key. He doesn't have the real records. The ones that prove he's been systematically destroying alpha businesses for the past 2 years. The ones that show his connections to the conspiracy my father died investigating. Damien stared at the device. You have proof? I have everything. Bank transfers, shell company formations, communications between pack leaders, evidence of at least 6 murders disguised as accidents or suicides. Isabella's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. I have enough information to bring down not just Marcus Blackwood, but the entire network he's working with. Then why haven't you used it? Because I needed access to your pack's internal structure to complete the picture. I needed to understand how they were infiltrating and manipulating established alphas. Isabella stepped closer, close enough that he could see the gold flecks in her dark eyes. And I needed an alpha powerful enough to help me take them down. Damien reached out and cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing across her cheekbones. You're not just human, are you? Half human, she confirmed, her voice barely above a whisper. My mother was a wolf. My father was human, but genetically compatible enough to produce viable offspring. I have some enhanced abilities, better senses, faster reflexes, limited empathic reading, but I can't shift. Can you fight? Isabella's smile turned predatory. I can do much more than that. I can hunt. Before Damien could respond, every light in the penthouse went out simultaneously, plunging them into darkness broken only by the city lights filtering through the windows. In the sudden silence, they could hear the faint whisper of the elevator rising toward their floor. How many? Isabella whispered, her enhanced hearing already cataloging the sounds from the hallway. 6. Maybe 7. Damien's wolf senses were fully engaged now, tracking heartbeats, breathing patterns, the subtle sense of weapons and tactical gear. Professional. Well-trained. Blackwood's not waiting until dawn.
No.
He's not. Isabella reached under her dress and produced a compact pistol that looked like it could stop a charging rhino. Back exit. Service elevator. But they'll have it covered. Damien moved to a section of wall that looked identical to the rest and pressed his palm against what appeared to be solid paneling. A hidden panel slid aside, revealing an arsenal that would have impressed a small military unit. We go through them. I like your style. As Damien armed himself with weapons that definitely weren't legal in New York State, Isabella checked her pistol and secured additional ammunition from her purse, which was apparently more tactical gear than fashion accessory. One question, Damien said as they moved toward the foyer. Why me? Why not take this evidence to the council directly? Isabella met his gaze in the dim light filtering through the windows. Because the council has been compromised. At least 3 of the 7 alphas serving on it are part of Blackwood's conspiracy. Going through official channels would have gotten me killed just like my father. The elevator chimed softly as it reached their floor. And because, Isabella continued, her voice dropping to a whisper that seemed to caress his skin, I've been watching you for months, Damien Steele. You're the only alpha in North America who's strong enough, smart enough, and ruthless enough to help me burn this entire conspiracy to the ground. The elevator doors opened with barely a whisper of sound. Isabella smiled, and in the darkness, her teeth gleamed like a predator's. Ready to save your empire? Damien's answering smile was all alpha wolf and absolutely terrifying. Let's hunt. Chapter 3. Blood in the Boardroom. The first assassin through Damien's front door died before he could fire a shot. Isabella moved like liquid shadow, her enhanced reflexes carrying her across the marble foyer in a heartbeat. The tactical knife that materialized in her hand found the gap between the operative's body armor with surgical precision, dropping him silently to the floor. Damien felt his wolf surge with approval and something deeper, more primal. She wasn't just deadly, she was magnificent. 6 more, he whispered, pressing himself against the wall beside the doorway. His enhanced hearing tracked their movements through the hallway beyond, 3 moving toward the main living area, 2 heading for the bedroom wing, 1 circling toward what they thought was a service entrance. The one going left doesn't know about the panic room, Isabella murmured, wiping her blade clean on the dead man's tactical vest. That's our exit. But even as she spoke, the sound of shattering glass erupted from the living room as the assault team abandoned stealth for speed. They'd found the penthouse empty and were moving to a full search pattern. Change of plans, Damien growled, his canines extending slightly as his wolf demanded action. We end this here. Isabella's dark eyes gleamed with something that might have been excitement. I was hoping you'd say that. The second operative to enter the foyer walked into a nightmare. Damien moved with inhuman speed, his hand closing around the man's throat before he could raise his weapon. The crushing grip lifted the assassin off his feet, and Isabella watched with fascination as Damien's carefully controlled humanity slipped to reveal the predator beneath. Who sent you? Damien's voice carried harmonics that made the man's eyes roll back in terror. B. Blackwood, the operative gasped. But you're supposed to be. His words cut off as Damien's grip tightened past the point of speech. Past the point of breath. Past the point of life. Behind you, Isabella said calmly, not even looking up from where she was searching the first body for identification. Damien spun and hurled the corpse at the third assassin emerging from the hallway. The impact sent both bodies crashing into a wall of floor-to-ceiling windows. The reinforced glass held, but spider web cracks spread across the surface like frozen lightning. 3 down, Isabella reported, standing with fluid grace. The bedroom team is moving this way, and the one circling the service entrance just triggered the silent alarm on the stairwell. Good, Damien said, his smile showing too many teeth. I want them to know exactly where we are. As if summoned by his words, automatic weapons fire erupted from the hallway leading to the master suite. Bullets chewed through expensive artwork and custom millwork, sending splinters of exotic wood flying like shrapnel. Isabella rolled behind the marble bar as Damien dove for cover behind a leather sofa that probably cost more than most people's cars. The distinctive crack of military-grade ammunition told them they weren't dealing with ordinary mercenaries. Armor-piercing rounds, Isabella called out during a brief lull in the gunfire. These aren't Blackwood's usual thugs. No, Damien agreed, his enhanced hearing tracking the approaching footsteps. These are council enforcers. The implication hit Isabella like a physical blow. Council enforcers were the supernatural world's equivalent of special forces, wolves trained from childhood to eliminate threats to alpha authority. If Blackwood had access to enforcers, his conspiracy reached much higher than they'd suspected. How many alphas does he own? She asked, checking her pistol's ammunition. Enough. Damien's expression was grim. The council hasn't deployed enforcers for unauthorized kills in over 50 years. If they're here, it means Blackwood has convinced at least 4 of the 7 council members that I'm a threat to supernatural security. Another burst of gunfire forced them deeper into cover. Through the noise, Isabella could hear tactical communications, short, professional phrases that meant their attackers were coordinating for a final assault. "Damien," she said quietly, "there's something I need to tell you before we die. We're not dying tonight. The conspiracy my father uncovered, it's not just about territory or money." Isabella reloaded her weapon with practiced efficiency. "It's about evolution. Blackwood and his allies believe the current supernatural power structure is obsolete. They're planning to reveal the existence of werewolves to the human world." Damien's hands stilled on his rifle. "That's impossible." The Accords. The Accords were signed in 1847. The world has changed since then. Isabella peered around the edge of the bar, calculating angles and distances. Blackwood thinks werewolves should rule openly instead of hiding in the shadows. He's planning to stage a series of supernatural terrorist attacks that will force the government to acknowledge our existence, then position his coalition as the only wolves capable of maintaining order. The casualties would be millions, human and supernatural. Isabella's voice was steady, but Damien could scent the rage beneath her calm exterior. "That's why my father had to die. He discovered the false flag operations Blackwood has been planning." Before Damien could respond, the gunfire stopped completely. In the sudden silence, they could hear the soft whisper of tactical boots on marble. "Steele." The voice that echoed through the penthouse carried the authority of an alpha and the cold professionalism of a killer. "Marcus Blackwood sends his regards." Isabella caught Damien's eye and gestured toward the damaged windows. The spiderweb cracks had weakened the reinforced glass significantly. If they could create enough impact. "And you are?" Damien called back, using his alpha voice to project calm confidence even as he calculated their chances of survival. "Commander Sarah Blake, Council Enforcement Division. You've been declared a threat to supernatural security under Article 7 of the Pack Preservation Protocols." Isabella's blood went cold. Article 7 was the supernatural equivalent of a death warrant, authorization for enforcers to eliminate any alpha who threatened the stability of the werewolf community. It hadn't been invoked in living memory. "On what grounds?" Damien demanded. "Unauthorized cooperation with human law enforcement agencies, illegal use of supernatural abilities for corporate advantage, and conspiracy to expose werewolf existence to human authorities." Blake's voice moved closer as she spoke. "You have 60 seconds to surrender peacefully, or we will use lethal force." Damien and Isabella looked at each other across the devastated penthouse. Every charge was false, manufactured from fragments of truth and twisted into evidence of treason. But proving their innocence would require surviving the next few minutes. "The charges are fabricated," Damien called out. "Evidence suggests otherwise. Furthermore, your association with Isabella Rivera, daughter of a known supernatural insurgent, supports the conclusion that you've been radicalized against council authority." Isabella's jaw clenched. Even in death, her father was being used as a weapon against them. 30 seconds, Steele. Isabella caught Damien's attention and held up 3 fingers. Then 2. Then 1. She rolled out from behind the bar, her pistol spitting fire at the damaged windows as Damien emerged from cover and opened up with a rifle. The combined impact of their weapons' fire and the structural damage from the earlier fight finally overwhelmed the reinforced glass. The window exploded outward in a shower of crystal fragments, taking a section of the outer wall with it and opening the penthouse to the New York night 60 floors above the street. Wind howled through the breach as Isabella and Damien sprinted toward the opening. Behind them, the enforcers recovered from their surprise and resumed firing, but their shots went wide as they struggled to maintain accuracy in the sudden chaos of wind and debris. "Trust me," Isabella shouted over the noise, grabbing Damien's hand as they reached the edge of the building. For a heartbeat, they stood balanced on the precipice between life and death, between the certain destruction behind them and the uncertain darkness below. Then Isabella smiled, an expression of pure, reckless joy, and pulled him into the void. They fell, but not far. Isabella's free hand caught the cable sheet spotted during her reconnaissance of the building, a maintenance line that ran between Damien's penthouse and the roof of the adjacent skyscraper. Her enhanced strength and reflexes allowed her to control their descent, swinging them in a controlled arc toward the neighboring building's setback terrace. They landed hard but alive on manicured rooftop gardens 40 floors above the street. "How did you?" Damien began. "I told you I've been watching you for months." Isabella helped him to his feet, checking for injuries with professional efficiency. "I've had escape routes planned since the day I decided to approach you." Above them, muzzle flashes lit the broken window of Damien's penthouse as the enforcers realized their quarry had escaped. It would take them several minutes to reach the neighboring building, but not much longer than that. "We need to move," Isabella said, leading him toward a rooftop access door. "I have a safe house in Queens, but first we need to collect the evidence from your office. The building will be swarming with Blackwood's people."
Not yet.
The enforcers were supposed to kill us quietly and make it look like a tragic accident. Now that we've escaped, they'll need time to regroup and coordinate with local assets. Isabella produced a set of lockpicks from her seemingly bottomless tactical arsenal. "We have maybe 2 hours before Steel Industries becomes a war zone." The access door opened to reveal a service stairwell that led down into the guts of the building. As they descended, Damien found himself studying the woman who'd turned his world upside down in less than 24 hours.
"Who are you really?" he asked.
"And don't tell me you're just an analyst with daddy issues." Isabella paused on the landing between floors, her dark eyes unreadable in the emergency lighting. "I'm the daughter of 2 dead parents, the last member of a family that devoted their lives to protecting the supernatural community from itself. I'm a woman who's spent the past 6 months planning the complete destruction of Marcus Blackwood and everyone who helped to murder the only family I had left." She started down the stairs again, her voice floating back to him in the narrow stairwell. "And as of tonight, I'm the mate of the most dangerous alpha in North America, whether he's figured that out yet or not." Damien stopped moving entirely. "Mate." Isabella's laughter echoed in the stairwell, rich, warm, and utterly fearless. "Did you think the attraction was coincidental? Did you think it was normal for a human woman to feel no fear in the presence of an alpha wolf?" She looked back at him, and her eyes seemed to glow in the dim light. "I've been able to scent your wolf since the moment I walked into your office, Damien. Just like you've been able to sense the wildness in me. You can't know that for certain. Are rare, powerful, and unmistakable once both parties acknowledge them." Isabella resumed her descent, but her voice carried clearly. "The question is whether you're going to fight it or embrace it." Damien followed her down the stairs, his mind reeling from everything that had happened in the past few hours. His carefully ordered world was collapsing around him, his empire was under assault from enemies he'd trusted, and he was apparently mated to a woman who collected tactical weapons like other people collected shoes. It should have been terrifying. Instead, for the first time in months, he felt truly alive. "Isabella," he called softly. "Yes. When this is over, when we've destroyed Blackwood and his conspiracy and saved both our kinds from a war that would devastate everyone, remind me to properly court you." Her laughter bubbled up again, filled with promise and danger and the wild joy of a predator who'd found her perfect hunting partner. "I'll hold you to that, Alpha." They reached the ground floor to find the building's lobby empty except for a single security guard who was conveniently unconscious at his desk. Isabella checked his pulse, alive but drugged, and moved toward the service exit. "Your office building is 6 blocks north," she said, consulting her phone. "If we move fast and stay to the shadows, we can be in and out before Blackwood's cleanup crew arrives." And then, Isabella turned to face him fully, and in the fluorescent lighting of the empty lobby, she looked like an avenging angel dressed for war. "Then we take everything he loves away from him, one piece at a time, until he's left with nothing but the knowledge that he destroyed himself trying to destroy us." Her smile was sharp enough to cut diamonds. "And then, my dear Alpha, we're going to make him pay for every drop of blood he's spilled." Chapter 4: Shadows and Steel. The Steel Industries building rose like a monolith of black glass and steel against the Manhattan skyline, its 42 floors dark except for the scattered glow of security lighting. At 3:17 a.m., the financial district was a canyon of shadows and empty ambition, the perfect hunting ground for predators who preferred darkness to daylight. Isabella and Damien approached from the south, using construction scaffolding and service alleys to avoid the main thoroughfares where security cameras might betray their presence. She moved with the fluid grace of someone who'd spent years learning to be invisible, while he followed with the predatory patience of a wolf stalking prey through familiar territory. 2 guards in the lobby, Isabella whispered, studying the building through compact binoculars. Both human, both armed, both looking nervous enough to suggest they've been told to expect trouble. They're not Blackwood's people, Damien confirmed after scenting the air. Private security, probably hired through legitimate channels. Which means they don't know what they're really guarding against. Good. I'd rather not kill innocent civilians if we can avoid it. Isabella lowered the binoculars and turned to study him. Can you get us to the executive floors without using the main elevators? Service lift in the parking garage. It requires a key card, but mine should still work. Blackwood won't have had time to update the security protocols. Damien's smile was predatory. The question is whether you can handle what we're likely to find up there. Isabella's answering smile was equally dangerous. Try me. They descended into the building's underground parking garage through a service entrance that Isabella opened with lock picks and an electronic device that made short work of the alarm system. The familiar scent of motor oil and concrete couldn't quite mask the newer smell that made Damien's wolf pace uneasily, blood, fear, and the distinctive musk of werewolves under stress. Someone's been here recently, he murmured, his enhanced senses cataloging threats. Multiple wolves, at least 2 humans, and... His nostrils flared. Michael Chun. Alive? Difficult to tell. The scent trail is hours old. Damien led her toward the service elevator, his body language shifting into the controlled alertness of a hunting predator. But there's enough blood that he's either badly injured or... The elevator doors opened before he could finish the sentence, revealing a sight that made Isabella's breath catch and Damien's wolf snarl with rage. Michael Chin sat slumped against the back wall of the elevator car, his expensive suit torn and blood-stained, his face a map of cuts and bruises that spoke of professional interrogation. But his chest rose and fell with shallow breaths, and his eyes tracked to them with desperate hope. "Boss," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "Thank God. I thought they were going to leave me here to die." Damien's hand moved to the gun concealed beneath his jacket, but Isabella caught his wrist before he could draw. "Wait," she said quietly. "Something's wrong." Michael's relief was too perfect, his positioning too convenient. And underneath the obvious injuries, Isabella's enhanced senses detected something else, the chemical signature of performance-enhancing drugs and the subtle wrongness that suggested supernatural influence. "Michael," Damien said carefully, not moving closer to the elevator. "Tell me about the Nakamura merger." "It's gone. Blackwood got to them first, just like you suspected." Michael tried to stand and stumbled, catching himself against the elevator wall. "Boss, we need to get out of here. Blackwood's people are coming back, and they're bringing council enforcers." "How do you know about the enforcers?" Michael's eyes flickered, just for an instant, but it was enough to confirm Isabella's suspicions. "I heard them talking. They said something about Article 7, about making you disappear permanently." Damien's wolf recognized the lie even as his human mind wanted to believe in his beta's innocence. "Step out of the elevator, Michael." "I'm hurt, boss." "I don't think I can." That wasn't a request. The alpha command in Damien's voice should have compelled immediate obedience from any wolf in his pack. Instead, Michael's posture straightened and his injuries seemed to matter less as something else took control of his responses. "I'm sorry, boss," Michael said, and his voice carried harmonics that belonged to a different alpha entirely. "But you really should have taken Marcus's generous offer." The attack came from 3 directions simultaneously. Michael lunged forward with inhuman speed, his fingernails extending into claws that could rip through Kevlar. The elevator shaft above them erupted with the sound of rappelling equipment as tactical teams descended from multiple floors. And the parking garage's main entrance exploded inward as armored vehicles disgorged more enforcers than Isabella had ever seen in one place. But Damien and Isabella had been expecting betrayal. Isabella's pistol was in her hand before Michael completed his first step, her enhanced reflexes allowing her to put 3 rounds center mass into his chest. The bullets, specially designed for supernatural targets, carried enough silver to drop a charging werewolf, but Michael kept coming as if the wounds were minor inconveniences. "He's been enhanced," Isabella shouted over the sound of gunfire erupting from the garage entrance. "Military-grade combat drugs and supernatural augmentation." Damien didn't waste time with bullets. He met Michael's charge with the full force of an alpha's physical dominance, his hand closing around his former beta's throat in a grip that could crush steel. But even as Michael's windpipe collapsed under the pressure, his claws raked across Damien's ribs, opening wounds that burned with the distinctive fire of poisoned silver. "Damien!" Isabella spun toward the rappelling enforcers, her weapons spitting fire at targets descending through the elevator shaft. "Whatever you're going to do it fast." The enforcers reached the garage level with military precision, spreading out to establish overlapping fields of fire, while their leader, a woman whose scent carried the authority of an alpha and the cold professionalism of a killer, directed the assault with hand signals. "Sarah Blake," Damien growled, recognizing the enforcer commander from their earlier encounter. "Should have known Blackwood would call in his best asset." "Marcus Blackwood has done nothing but follow council directives," Blake replied, her voice carrying clearly across the garage. "You, on the other hand, have violated the fundamental laws that govern our kind. By refusing to surrender my pack to a conspiracy?" Damien hurled Michael's body aside and drew his own weapon. "By investigating financial crimes that threaten the stability of multiple territories? By cooperating with a known insurgent?" Blake's gaze shifted to Isabella. "Isabella Rivera is wanted by the Council for crimes against supernatural security. Her surrender is not optional." Isabella's laughter echoed through the parking garage, bright, fearless, and absolutely terrifying. "You want to arrest me for investigating my father's murder? For uncovering evidence of the conspiracy that's been tearing apart the supernatural community for the past 2 years. Your father was a terrorist who threatened to expose werewolf existence to human authorities. My father was a financial analyst who discovered that Marcus Blackwood and his allies have been systematically murdering their way to power." Isabella's voice carried clearly as she reloaded her weapon with movements too fast for normal human reflexes. "But I suppose the Council prefers Marcus's version of events." Blake's hesitation was barely perceptible, but Damien caught it. "You don't know," he said with sudden understanding. "Blackwood fed you intelligence about Isabella and her father, but you never saw the actual evidence, did you? The Council's investigation was thorough. The Council's investigation was a sham designed to eliminate witnesses before they could testify." Isabella stepped into the open, her weapon trained on Blake, but her posture suggesting negotiation rather than immediate violence. "Commander Blake, I'm going to make you an offer. Give me 60 seconds to show you what Eduardo Rivera really discovered, and I'll prove that Marcus Blackwood has been manipulating the Council from the beginning." "Isabella," Damien warned quietly. "She's an enforcer. They don't negotiate." "No," Blake said slowly. "But we do investigate." 60 seconds, Rivera. "But my people keep their weapons trained on you, and any aggressive movement results in immediate termination." Isabella nodded and reached slowly for the tablet she'd shown Damien earlier. Eduardo Rivera spent 18 months tracking financial irregularities in Alpha-owned businesses across North America. What he found wasn't random corporate crime. It was a coordinated campaign designed to weaken established pack leaders. She activated the tablet's display and held it where Blake could see the screen. "These are bank transfers from shell companies controlled by Marcus Blackwood to mercenary groups, weapons dealers, and what your intelligence files probably classify as supernatural insurgents." Blake's expression remained professional, but her weapon lowered slightly as she studied the data. "These transactions total over $40 million in the past 2 years. All of it funding operations designed to destabilize Alpha territories, eliminate inconvenient witnesses, and create the kind of chaos that would justify emergency measures by the Council." Isabella swiped to the next screen. "Including the funding for the team that murdered my father when he got too close to the truth. This could be fabricated." Cross-reference the account numbers with the financial intelligence in your own files, Isabella challenged. Check the dates against the timeline of alpha challenges, territorial disputes, and accidental deaths that have plagued the supernatural community. Blake was silent for a long moment, her enhanced senses no doubt detecting the absence of deception in Isabella's heartbeat and breathing. Around the garage, her enforcers maintained their positions, but their leader's uncertainty was beginning to affect their absolute confidence. Even if this is accurate, Blake said finally, it doesn't change the fact that you and Steele have violated council directives. Council directives issued by alphas who are either part of Blackwood's conspiracy or being manipulated by carefully selected intelligence. Damien stepped forward, his alpha presence filling the space between them. Commander, how many of the 7 council members personally reviewed the evidence against Isabella and her father? Blake's silence was answer enough. Marcus Blackwood has spent 2 years positioning himself as the council's primary intelligence source on supernatural insurgency, Isabella continued. Every report, every analysis, every recommendation has been filtered through his organization. He's been feeding the council exactly the information needed to eliminate his enemies and consolidate his power. The evidence is in that tablet, along with recorded communications between Blackwood and his co-conspirators, financial records proving their involvement in at least 12 murders, and documentation of their plan to stage a series of false flag operations designed to force the revelation of werewolf existence to human governments. Blake lowered her weapon completely. Around the garage, her enforcers shifted uneasily as their leader's body language suggested a fundamental change in the tactical situation. If what you're showing me is genuine, Blake said slowly, then the council has been compromised for years. 3 of the 7 sitting alphas are directly involved in Blackwood's conspiracy, Isabella confirmed. 2 more are being blackmailed or manipulated. The council, as currently constituted, cannot be trusted to investigate these crimes. Then what do you propose? Damien and Isabella exchanged glances, a moment of silent communication between potential mates who were learning to hunt as a team. We propose, Damien said, his voice carrying the full authority of an alpha who'd ruled both corporate boardrooms and supernatural territories, that you help us tear down Marcus Blackwood's empire before he can implement the final phase of his plan. Which is? Isabella's smile was sharp enough to cut stone. Tomorrow morning, Blackwood is scheduled to meet with representatives from the Department of Homeland Security. He's planning to voluntarily reveal the existence of werewolves as part of what he'll call a supernatural terrorism prevention initiative. He's going to position himself as the government's primary liaison with the werewolf community, Damien added. Every alpha in North America will be forced to accept his authority or be classified as a threat to national security. Blake's expression darkened as the implications became clear. That would effectively make him the supreme alpha of the entire continent. With the full backing of human military and intelligence resources, Isabella confirmed. And once he has that kind of power, everyone who's opposed him, including loyal council enforcers who might ask inconvenient questions, becomes expendable. The parking garage fell silent except for the distant hum of the city above them. Blake studied the tablet's data for another long moment, then looked up at her assembled team. Stand down, she ordered. We're reassessing the tactical situation. Commander? One of the enforcers asked uncertainly. I said stand down, Sergeant. That's a direct order. As her people lowered their weapons, Blake turned back to Damien and Isabella. What do you need from us? Isabella's smile was triumphant. Access to council security protocols, intelligence on Blackwood's current location, and enough firepower to storm whatever fortress he's hiding in. And after we take him down? After we take him down, Damien said, his voice carrying promises of violence and justice in equal measure, we're going to make sure that every alpha who betrayed the supernatural community to serve his ambition faces judgment for their crimes. Blake nodded slowly. Commander Sarah Blake, Council Enforcement Division, reporting for duty under emergency protocols. What are your orders, Alpha Steele? Damien's smile was all predator, all alpha, all dangerous promise. We hunt. Chapter 5, The Alpha's Gambit. The abandoned warehouse in Red Hook had been gutted by fire 3 years ago, leaving behind a skeletal frame of steel and concrete that provided perfect cover for clandestine operations. At 5:47 a.m., as the first hints of dawn touched the East River, it served as the staging ground for what would either be the salvation or destruction of the North American werewolf community. Isabella spread tactical maps across a makeshift table constructed from shipping pallets while Damien coordinated with Blake's enforcer team through encrypted communications. The warehouse smelled of rust, river water, and the distinctive musk of wolves preparing for war. Blackwood's holed up in his private estate in the Hamptons, Blake reported, studying intelligence photographs through night vision scopes. 40-acre compound, private security force of at least 30 personnel, and enough electronic countermeasures to interfere with satellite surveillance. Plus whatever supernatural assets he's managed to assemble, Damien added grimly. If he's planning to reveal werewolf existence to the government today, he'll have his most loyal pack members close by. Isabella traced defensive positions on the compound map with a red marker. According to the financial records I've been tracking, Blackwood has been funneling resources into this estate for the past 6 months. Military-grade weapons, tactical equipment, communication systems that rival anything the Pentagon uses. It's a fortress, Blake concluded. Direct assault would be suicide, even with enforcer support. Then we don't assault it directly. Isabella's smile carried the dangerous edge that Damien was learning to associate with her most brilliant tactical insights. We make him come to us. Damien studied her expression with growing appreciation. What did you have in mind? Marcus Blackwood has spent 2 years carefully constructing a web of lies, manipulation, and manufactured evidence to convince the council that he's their most reliable intelligence source. Isabella pulled up financial data on her tablet. But that web has a critical weakness. It depends entirely on his personal credibility and his ability to control the narrative. Go on. What if we arranged for him to lose both simultaneously? Blake frowned.
How?
Isabella's fingers flew across the tablet screen, pulling up communication logs, financial transfers, and recorded conversations that painted a devastating picture of corruption and conspiracy. At 9 o'clock this morning, Marcus Blackwood is scheduled to meet with Deputy Director Catherine Morris of Homeland Security to discuss what he's calling emerging supernatural threats to national security. We know about the meeting, Damien said, but we can't prevent it without. We're not going to prevent it, Isabella interrupted. We're going to crash it. Specifically, we're going to provide Deputy Director Morris with irrefutable evidence that Marcus Blackwood is the supernatural threat she should be worried about. Blake's eyes widened as she understood the implications. You want to burn him using his own strategy. Better than that. I want to destroy his credibility so completely that the government classifies him as a hostile entity and the council has no choice but to authorize lethal force. Isabella's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. Marcus Blackwood wanted to control the narrative around supernatural government relations. Let's give him exactly what he asked for. Damien felt his wolf stir with approval. It was a predator strategy, using the enemy's own momentum against them, turning strength into weakness, confidence into vulnerability. What do you need? He asked. Access to the federal building where the meeting is taking place, technical support to ensure our evidence reaches the right people, and a distraction significant enough to draw Blackwood's security assets away from his estate. The distraction I can provide, Blake said. Half my team will stage a high-profile raid on one of Blackwood's shell companies in Manhattan. Enough noise and federal involvement to make him paranoid about his other operations. And I'll handle the federal building, Damien added. Steel Industries has legitimate government contracts, which means I have security clearance and access credentials that will get us through the front door. Isabella nodded approvingly. That leaves the technical aspects of the operation. We need to ensure that every piece of evidence reaches Deputy Director Morris in a format that's both undeniable and immediately actionable. Meaning we're going to hand the United States government a complete intelligence package that positions Marcus Blackwood as a clear and present danger to national security. Isabella's expression was predatory satisfaction personified. Bank records proving he's funded terrorist operations, communication intercepts showing his plans to destabilize supernatural communities, and documentation of his conspiracy to manipulate federal agencies. Blake whistled softly. That's not evidence. That's a death warrant. Exactly. Isabella's voice carried no trace of remorse. Marcus Blackwood has murdered innocents, betrayed his own kind, and planned to drag both human and supernatural communities into a war that would cost millions of lives. He's earned whatever judgment he receives. Damien studied the woman who turned his world upside down in less than 48 hours. She was brilliant, ruthless, and absolutely committed to justice, even when that justice required methods that would have made lesser people hesitate. She was perfect. There's one problem, he said finally. Even if we destroy Blackwood's credibility with the government and the council, his co-conspirators are still out there. Take him down, and they'll just find another figurehead. Not if we take them all down simultaneously. Isabella switched her tablet to a different screen, revealing a network diagram that looked like a spider web of corruption spanning the entire continent. Every financial transaction, every communication, every meeting between Blackwood and his allies has been documented. We have enough evidence to bring down not just Marcus, but every Alpha who's been part of his conspiracy. How many? Blake asked quietly. 17 Alpha-level werewolves, 43 Beta and Gamma operatives, and at least 6 human government officials who've been either corrupted or compromised. Isabella's voice was steady, professional. The largest supernatural criminal conspiracy in recorded history. The warehouse fell silent as the magnitude of what they were planning became clear. They weren't just taking down a single corrupt Alpha, they were proposing to restructure the entire supernatural power dynamic of North America. The Council will never authorize action on that scale, Blake said finally. The Council won't have a choice, Damien replied. Once the evidence becomes public and the government starts demanding answers, every supernatural authority will be forced to cooperate or be classified as part of the threat. And afterward? Blake's question carried the weight of someone who understood that the world they were planning to create would be fundamentally different from the one they knew. Isabella and Damien exchanged glances, another moment of silent communication between predators who'd learned to hunt as perfectly matched partners. Afterward, Isabella said, "We help build something better. A supernatural community that doesn't depend on secrets, lies, and the murder of inconvenient witnesses to maintain stability. A community where alphas like Blackwood can't manipulate fear and ignorance to accumulate power," Damien added. "Where the Council actually serves the interests of all werewolves instead of protecting the privileges of a connected few." Blake considered this for a long moment, studying their faces with the enhanced senses that allowed her to detect deception, uncertainty, or hidden agendas. Whatever she found seemed to satisfy her. "Commander Sarah Blake, requesting permission to operate under emergency protocols in support of Alpha Steele's mission," she said formally. "Permission granted," Damien replied with equal formality. "Welcome to the revolution, Commander." As Blake moved to coordinate with her team, Isabella stepped closer to Damien, close enough that he could smell her perfume mixed with a wild scent that drove his wolf to distraction. "Are you ready for this?" she asked quietly. "Once we trigger this operation, there's no going back. Your life, your empire, everything you've built, it all changes forever." Damien cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs tracing the elegant line of her cheekbones. "My empire was built on secrets and careful compromises with corruption. If bringing down Blackwood destroys that, then maybe it's time to build something better. And us." The question was barely a whisper, but it carried the weight of everything unsaid between them. "Us," Damien said, leaning closer until their foreheads touched, "is the only thing I'm certain about in this entire mess. Whatever world we create when this is over, I want to share it with you." Isabella's smile was radiant enough to light the dim warehouse. "In that case, Alpha Steele, let's go save the world." "Isabella," he said as she started to turn away. "Yes. After we destroy Blackwood's conspiracy and restructure supernatural society and probably start a war between the government and every corrupt Alpha in North America." His smile was pure predator, pure promise, pure devotion. "Remind me to properly claim you as my mate." Her laughter bubbled up. wild and joyous and absolutely fearless.
I'll hold you to that.
As dawn broke over the East River, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, 3 predators prepared to hunt the most dangerous prey of their lives. The next few hours would determine not just their survival, but the future of every supernatural being in North America. Isabella checked her weapons one final time, her movements fluid and deadly. Blake coordinated final tactical preparations with her enforcers, their professional competence a reassuring constant in an operation that depended on precision timing. And Damien stood at the warehouse's broken windows, watching the city wake up to what might be its last normal day. "Ready?" Isabella asked, joining him at the window. "Ready," he confirmed. Together, they walked into the dawn and toward a confrontation that would reshape their world forever. But as they left the warehouse, none of them noticed the small drone hovering silently above the building, its camera recording everything for transmission to a recipient who'd been expecting their plans all along. Marcus Blackwood's voice echoed through the speakers of a conference room 50 miles away. "Excellent. Let them come. It's time to end this game once and for all." Chapter 6. The Federal Gambit. The Jacob K. Javits Federal Building rose 34 floors above Foley Square in Lower Manhattan, its glass and steel facade reflecting the morning sun like a monument to bureaucratic power. At 8:42 a.m., the building hummed with the usual rhythm of government business, federal agents, administrators, and contractors moving through security checkpoints with the practiced efficiency of those who served the machinery of American authority. Damien and Isabella approached the main entrance with the confidence of people who belonged there. His tailored charcoal suit and platinum cufflinks projected the image of a defense contractor worth hundreds of millions, while her conservative navy dress and leather briefcase suggested a senior analyst whose security clearance opened doors throughout the federal hierarchy. "Deputy Director Morris is expecting us," Damien told the security officer at the main checkpoint, producing identification that would pass any scrutiny the government could apply. Steel Industries has been contracted to provide supplementary intelligence analysis for this morning's briefing. The officer scanned their credentials, cross-referenced them against the building's visitor database, and nodded with professional courtesy. 32nd floor, Conference Room C. You'll need to check any recording devices and surrender all electronic equipment except for approved tablets. Isabella smiled with just the right mixture of compliance and mild annoyance as she placed her phone, watch, and several innocuous-looking devices in the security lockers. What the screening couldn't detect were the microscopic transmitters woven into her clothing, the encrypted data storage disguised as jewelry, and the communications equipment that appeared to be nothing more than designer accessories. They cleared security and rode the elevator in silence, but Damien could feel the tension radiating from Isabella's carefully controlled posture. In less than 20 minutes, they would be in the same room as one of the most dangerous alphas in North America, attempting to destroy him using the very federal authority he sought to manipulate. "Remember," Isabella murmured as they approached the 32nd floor, "Morris doesn't know about the supernatural community yet. Everything we present has to make sense within a purely human intelligence framework. And if Blackwood recognizes what we're doing, then we improvise." Her smile carried deadly promise. But Marcus Blackwood has spent so much time manipulating others that he's forgotten what it feels like to be outmaneuvered. Today, he learns. Conference Room C was designed to intimidate, a long table of polished mahogany surrounded by leather chairs, walls lined with maps and classified intelligence displays, and enough electronic equipment to coordinate a small war. Deputy Director Catherine Morris stood at the far end reviewing documents, her silver hair and conservative suit projecting the authority of someone who'd spent 30 years climbing the federal hierarchy. Marcus Blackwood sat at her right hand like a trusted advisor. Even in human form, he was unmistakably an alpha. 6'4" with the broad shoulders and predatory grace that marked him as an apex predator, his perfectly tailored suit couldn't quite disguise the coiled violence beneath his civilized exterior. His dark hair was touched with distinguished silver at the temples, and his pale blue eyes held the cold intelligence of someone who'd built an empire on the bones of his enemies. When Damien and Isabella entered the room, Those eyes locked onto them with the focused intensity of a wolf recognizing rival predators in his territory. Deputy Director Morris, Damien said smoothly, extending his hand with corporate charm. Damien Steele, Steele Industries. Thank you for including us in this briefing. Mr. Steele. Morris's handshake was firm, professional. Your company's intelligence analysis has been invaluable in several recent operations. I understand you have additional information relevant to today's discussion. We do indeed. Isabella stepped forward with the controlled confidence of someone who belonged in rooms where national security decisions were made. Isabella Rivera, Senior Analyst. We've uncovered what we believe to be a significant domestic threat that correlates directly with the intelligence Mr. Blackwood has been providing. Blackwood's expression didn't change, but Damien caught the subtle shift in his posture, the minute adjustment that suggested a predator recognizing potential danger. Ms. Rivera, I don't believe we've met, though your name is familiar. I imagine it would be. Isabella's smile was polite, professional, and absolutely venomous. My father was Eduardo Rivera. I believe you knew him. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Morris looked between them with the sharp attention of someone who sensed undercurrents she didn't understand, while Blackwood's facade of corporate courtesy developed hairline cracks. Eduardo Rivera, he said carefully. Yes, I recall the name. Didn't he die in some sort of accident? Murder, Isabella corrected with the same tone she might have used to comment on the weather. Tortured for information, then killed when he refused to cooperate with a conspiracy that threatened national security. But I'm sure you already knew that. Morris straightened. Ms. Rivera, these are serious allegations. If you have evidence of a murder connected to national security concerns, we have considerably more than that. Isabella activated her tablet and connected it to the room's display system. Deputy Director, what I'm about to show you represents 18 months of investigation into what we believe is the most sophisticated infiltration of federal agencies in American history. The main screen lit up with financial data, communication intercepts, and organizational charts that painted a devastating picture of corruption and conspiracy. Morris studied the information with the focused intensity of someone who'd built her career on recognizing genuine threats to American security. These are bank transfers from shell companies to known terrorist organizations, she said, her voice tight with controlled anger. Arms purchases, mercenary contracts, funding for operations that resulted in civilian casualties. All traced back to a single source, Isabella confirmed. Marcus Blackwood and a network of co-conspirators who've been using their positions as defense contractors and intelligence assets to manipulate federal policy while funding operations that directly threaten American interests. Blackwood's careful composure finally cracked. Deputy Director, I must protest these baseless accusations. Ms. Rivera is clearly operating under false information. Mr. Blackwood, Morris interrupted, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd spent decades dealing with threats both foreign and domestic. I suggest you remain silent while we review this evidence. Isabella advanced to the next screen, revealing communication intercepts that showed Blackwood coordinating with foreign operatives, planning operations on American soil, and discussing strategies for manipulating federal agencies. These are encrypted communications between Blackwood and operatives in 12 different countries, she continued. Planning terrorist attacks designed to create the kind of chaos that would justify emergency federal powers, coordinating with organized crime families, and arranging the elimination of federal agents who were getting too close to his operations. Morris's expression had shifted from professional interest to cold fury. Mr. Blackwood, are you telling me these communications are fabricated? They're taken completely out of context, Blackwood said, but his voice carried harmonics that suggested barely controlled desperation. My company provides intelligence to multiple federal agencies. Of course, we maintain contacts with, including contacts who've been funding attacks on American soil? Isabella interrupted, advancing to a screen that showed financial transfers directly connected to 3 recent terrorist incidents, including planning sessions for what you called false flag operations designed to justify expanded federal authority over domestic populations. The room fell silent except for the soft hum of electronic equipment. Morris studied the evidence with the methodical attention of someone who understood that careers, and possibly lives, hung in the balance of the next few minutes. "Mr. Blackwood," she said finally, "I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I advise you to answer very carefully. Are you or your organization involved in planning, funding, or executing operations designed to harm American citizens or compromise American security?" Blackwood looked around the room, at Morris with her federal authority, at the evidence displayed on the screens, at Damien and Isabella with their carefully controlled expressions of professional concern. When he spoke, his voice carried undertones that made the federal personnel in the room shift uncomfortably without understanding why. "Deputy Director Morris, what you need to understand is that the threats facing America are not what they appear to be. The intelligence I've been providing, the operations I've been coordinating, they're all designed to protect this country from dangers that your conventional agencies are simply not equipped to handle." "What kind of dangers?" Morris asked, though her hand had moved instinctively toward the service weapon concealed beneath her jacket. Blackwood's smile revealed too many teeth. "The kind that most humans prefer not to believe exist." And with those words, Marcus Blackwood made the choice that would change everything. His human facade fell away like a discarded mask, revealing the alpha wolf beneath, predatory grace, inhuman speed, and the kind of presence that made every survival instinct in the room scream warnings about apex predators and imminent death. "Deputy Director," he said, his voice now carrying the full harmonic weight of alpha dominance, "allow me to introduce you to the supernatural community." Morris reached for her weapon, but Blackwood moved with inhuman speed, crossing the conference room in a heartbeat and catching her wrist in a grip that could crush bone. "I wouldn't recommend that. What you're about to learn is far too important for such crude gestures." "Blackwood," Damien said quietly, his own alpha presence filling the room like an approaching storm. "Release her."
"Ah, Damien."
"Still playing the civilized businessman, I see." Blackwood's grip on Morris tightened, and she gasped as his fingers extended into claws that drew pinpricks of blood. "Tell me, have you explained to the Deputy Director what you really are?" Isabella was already moving, her hand reaching for weapons that weren't there, her enhanced reflexes calculating angles and distances in the sterile federal conference room. "Morris," she said urgently, "whatever he's about to tell you, remember that he's a terrorist who's been manipulating your agency for years." "What I am," Blackwood continued, ignoring them both, "is the future of human supernatural relations. What Damien and his misguided ally represent is the past, a time when our kind hid in shadows and pretended that inferior species deserved to rule the world." Morris stared at him with the wide-eyed shock of someone whose fundamental understanding of reality was being shattered. "What are you talking about? What do you mean, supernatural?" Her question cut off as Blackwood's human features shifted, his jaw elongating slightly, his canines extending, his eyes reflecting light in ways that human eyes never could. "I mean, Deputy Director, that werewolves are real, that we've been living among you for centuries, and that it's time for the charade of human dominance to end." The conference room erupted into chaos. Federal agents burst through the doors as silent alarms triggered by Isabella's hidden transmitters brought security flooding into the room. Morris tried to break free of Blackwood's grip, her training warring with the impossibility of what she was witnessing. And Damien felt his own wolf surge toward the surface, as every alpha instinct he possessed demanded he protect his mate and eliminate the threat to his pack. But Isabella's voice cut through the chaos with deadly calm. "Marcus Blackwood, by the authority of the Council of Alphas and under the emergency protocols established by the Pack Preservation Accords, you are under arrest for treason against the supernatural community." The federal agents stopped moving, their weapons trained on a scene they couldn't possibly understand. Morris stared at Isabella with growing comprehension. And Blackwood laughed, a sound that contained no humor and promised violence beyond anything the sterile federal building had ever witnessed. "The Council," he said. "My dear girl, I am the Council now. Or will be, once the federal government understands that their only choice is cooperation with werewolf authority." "Actually," Isabella said, her smile sharp enough to cut glass, Your only choice is surrender. Because in about 30 seconds, every piece of evidence we've presented here is going to be transmitted to every major news outlet, federal agency, and international intelligence service simultaneously. Blackwood's expression shifted from predatory confidence to genuine alarm. You wouldn't dare. Exposure would destroy both our communities. Controlled exposure, Damien corrected, his voice carrying the authority of an alpha who'd spent years managing crises. Exposure that positions you as a rogue element, a terrorist who hijacked supernatural authority for personal gain. Exposure that allows the government to work with legitimate supernatural leaders instead of criminals. The truth hit Blackwood like a physical blow. They hadn't just gathered evidence of his crimes. They'd engineered a scenario where his own actions would validate their narrative, where his attempt to control the revelation of supernatural existence would instead position him as the primary threat that justified cooperation between human and werewolf authorities. Deputy Director Morris, Isabella said formally, I believe your agency will find that legitimate supernatural authorities are very interested in working with the federal government to address the threat posed by Marcus Blackwood and his criminal organization. Morris, still processing revelations that challenged everything she thought she knew about the world, managed to nod. Yes. I think that would be in everyone's best interest. Blackwood's grip on her wrist loosened as he realized the magnitude of his defeat. In trying to control the narrative, he'd walked directly into a trap that made him the villain in a story where cooperation with supernatural authorities became a matter of national security. You've destroyed everything, he said quietly. No, Isabella replied. We've saved everything, including you, though you'll probably never appreciate that. As federal agents moved to secure the room and Deputy Director Morris began the phone calls that would reshape American supernatural policy forever, Damien caught Isabella's eye. Phase 1 complete? He asked quietly. Phase 1 complete, she confirmed. Now comes the hard part, which is... Isabella's smile promised violence, justice, and the kind of hunt that would become legend among their kind. Now we round up his co-conspirators before they realize their leader has been neutralized. Chapter 7. Hunt's End. The private airfield in Westchester County had been designed for discretion. No commercial traffic, minimal security presence, and landing strips that could accommodate everything from corporate jets to military transport aircraft. At 2:17 p.m., it served as the convergence point for what would become the largest supernatural law enforcement operation in North American history. Isabella stood beside a sleek black helicopter, coordinating the final assault through encrypted communications that linked federal agents, council enforcers, and the legitimate alpha leaders who'd spent the morning learning that their community had been under attack for 2 years. Her tactical gear was a far cry from the conservative dress she'd worn to the federal building. Now she looked like what she truly was, a predator preparing for the hunt of her lifetime. Damien emerged from the helicopter's cabin, where he'd been coordinating with Deputy Director Morris and the hastily assembled joint task force that would execute simultaneous raids across 12 states. The past 6 hours had been a blur of briefings, authorizations, and the delicate diplomacy required to merge human law enforcement with supernatural justice. Status report, he said, joining her beside the aircraft. 17 target locations confirmed, assets in position, federal backup standing by. Isabella's voice carried the calm professionalism of someone who'd spent months planning for this moment. Blake's enforcers are coordinating with local alpha leaders to ensure we capture Blackwood's entire network simultaneously. And our primary target? Isabella's smile was sharp enough to cut diamond. Marcus Blackwood is exactly where we expected him to be, his Hampton estate, surrounded by the last of his loyal operatives, preparing for a siege that's not coming. Damien studied the tactical displays showing the compound from multiple angles. He's had 6 hours to prepare defenses, call in reinforcements, plan escape routes. This won't be the simple takedown we managed in Manhattan. No, Isabella agreed. This will be better. Before Damien could ask what she meant, the distinctive sound of rotors announced the arrival of 3 additional helicopters bearing the insignia of the Council of Alphas. The lead aircraft touched down 50 yards away, and Commander Blake emerged, followed by a figure that made both Damien and Isabella straighten with automatic respect. Alexander Thorne, first alpha of the Council and the most powerful werewolf in North America, approached with the fluid grace of an apex predator who'd ruled supernatural society for over a century. At 6'6" with silver hair and eyes like winter storms, he projected an aura of authority that made other alphas instinctively submit. "Alpha Steele," he said, his voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate through bone and blood. "Ms. Rivera, the Council owes you both a debt that cannot easily be repaid." "First Alpha," Damien replied formally, inclining his head in recognition of superior rank. "The debt belongs to the community. We simply did what needed to be done." Thorne's smile was predatory approval. "Spoken like a true alpha. But before we celebrate, we have wolves to hunt." His gaze shifted to Isabella. "Ms. Rivera, your father would be proud of what you've accomplished. Eduardo was a good friend and a patriot to our kind." Isabella's composure flickered for just a moment, grief and pride warring in her expression. "Thank you, First Alpha. I hope today's work honors his memory. It does more than that. It ensures his sacrifice wasn't in vain." Thorne turned to study the tactical displays. "Marcus Blackwood's estate? 40 acres, private security force, and enough weaponry to fight a small war," Blake reported. "But our intelligence suggests he's not planning to fight." "Explain." Isabella activated a different screen, showing satellite imagery of the compound updated in real time. "Blackwood's preparing to run. Private jet on the landing strip, vehicles loaded with what appear to be critical files and assets, staff evacuating non-essential personnel. He knows his conspiracy has been exposed," Damien added. "The question is whether he's planning to disappear or make one final attempt to salvage his operation." Thorne studied the images with the focused attention of a predator calculating the behavior of dangerous prey. "Marcus Blackwood has spent his entire adult life accumulating power and influence. He won't simply vanish into hiding. His ego won't permit it." "Then what?" Isabella asked. "He'll try to take as many of us with him as possible." Thorne's voice carried the grim certainty of someone who'd faced this kind of enemy before. "Which means we need to be prepared for anything from hostages to explosives to a final desperate gambit that could endanger both our communities." As if summoned by his words, Isabella's tablet chimed with an incoming priority communication. She glanced at the screen and her expression darkened. "What is it?" Damien asked. "Marcus Blackwood just went live on every major news network simultaneously." Isabella's voice was tight with controlled anger. "He's making his play." She connected the tablet to the helicopter's communication system, and Blackwood's voice filled the space around them with polished authority and calculated charm. "Unprecedented threat to American security that has been hidden from the public for far too long. My name is Marcus Blackwood, and for the past 5 years I have been working with federal authorities to investigate and monitor a domestic terrorist organization that poses a clear and present danger to every American citizen." The feed switched to professional quality footage of what appeared to be a press conference at Blackwood's estate. He stood behind a podium bearing the seal of an organization called the North American Supernatural Security Council, flanked by individuals in military-style uniforms and surrounded by the trappings of legitimate authority. "The organization I'm referring to calls itself the Council of Alphas, and its members are not entirely human. They are werewolves, individuals with the ability to transform into predatory animals, enhanced physical capabilities, and a hierarchical society that views ordinary humans as inferior beings fit only for domination or elimination." Thorne's expression had gone absolutely cold. "He's forcing full disclosure. For the past 18 months, Blackwood continued, I have been gathering evidence of their plans to reveal themselves to the world through a series of coordinated terrorist attacks designed to create chaos and justify their emergence as humanity's new rulers. Today, with the full support of federal agencies who can no longer ignore this threat, we are moving to neutralize their leadership before they can implement their apocalyptic agenda." The camera panned to show federal agents, or individuals dressed to appear as federal agents, taking positions around the compound. In the background, military vehicles and what appeared to be legitimate government personnel lent credibility to Blackwood's narrative. He's using actors and private contractors to stage a federal operation, Isabella realized, making it look like the government is supporting his version of events. The individuals you will see in the coming hours, the so-called alphas, who will claim they are legitimate supernatural leaders, are terrorists who have infiltrated American business, politics, and law enforcement for the purpose of subverting human authority. Any cooperation with them is both illegal and treasonous. Damien felt his wolf snarl with rage as the implications became clear. He's positioning us as the terrorists. Anyone who opposes him can be classified as either a werewolf conspirator or a human traitor. Which means, Thorne said grimly, that our window for stopping him just closed. If he's broadcasting this narrative to the entire world, we have perhaps minutes before public opinion and federal response make any action against him politically impossible. Isabella was already moving toward the helicopter, her tactical gear and weapons painting her as exactly the kind of supernatural threat Blackwood was warning against. Then we don't give him those minutes. Isabella, Damien caught her arm. If we assault that compound now, while he's broadcasting, the entire world watches us stop a terrorist who's hijacked federal authority to justify genocide against a supernatural community. Her smile was fierce, brilliant, and absolutely terrifying. Marcus Blackwood wanted to control the narrative? Let's give him one hell of a story. Thorne's laugh was pure alpha predator. I like her, Steele. Are you going to claim her properly, or do I need to authorize someone else to court her? She's mine, Damien said with quiet certainty. In every way that matters. Good. Then let's go save both our species. Thorne gestured to Blake and her enforcers. Commander, what's our approach? Fast, brutal, and completely overwhelming, Blake replied. 3 insertion points, coordinated with the federal task force that Deputy Director Morris has standing by. We hit them from multiple directions simultaneously, neutralize any resistance, and capture Blackwood alive if possible. And if it's not possible? Isabella asked. Blake's smile was professional death. Then we make sure his broadcast ends with a very clear demonstration of what happens to terrorists who threaten both human and supernatural security. As the helicopters lifted off, carrying the combined forces of federal agents, council enforcers, and legitimate alpha leaders toward the final confrontation, Damien caught Isabella's hand. After this, he said quietly, after we've stopped Blackwood and saved both our communities and probably started a new era of human supernatural cooperation. After this, Isabella interrupted, her voice warm with promise and wild with the joy of a predator heading into the hunt of her lifetime. You're going to claim me properly. Mating bond, territorial rights, the whole alpha ceremony. Is that a promise? That's a guarantee. Her smile could have powered the entire eastern seaboard. But first, let's go show Marcus Blackwood what real predators look like. The helicopters swept toward the Hamptons like avenging angels, carrying justice and vengeance in equal measure toward a confrontation that would reshape the world forever. Below them, Blackwood's voice continued to broadcast his lies to a world that was about to learn the truth in the most dramatic way possible. But he'd made one critical error in his calculations. He'd assumed that exposing the supernatural community would give him power over both humans and werewolves. Instead, he was about to discover that some truths, once revealed, become weapons in the hands of those who truly deserve to wield them. Chapter 8. Mated in Fire. The assault on Blackwood's estate began at 3:47 p.m. with the precision of a military operation and the ruthless efficiency of predators who'd finally cornered their prey. Isabella rappelled from the lead helicopter into manicured gardens that had been transformed into a war zone, her boots hitting perfectly maintained lawn as automatic weapons fire erupted from the mansion's reinforced windows. Around her, council enforcers and federal agents moved with coordinated lethality, their tactical formations adapted for an enemy who possessed superhuman speed, strength, and senses. Perimeter secure, Blake's voice crackled through the tactical communications network. Primary target confirmed in the main structure, secondary assets dispersed throughout the compound. Isabella rolled behind a marble fountain as bullets chewed through ornamental stonework, her enhanced hearing cataloging threats while her tactical training calculated approach vectors. The mansion loomed before them like a fortress of glass and steel, its modern architecture providing multiple defensive positions for Blackwood's remaining loyalists. "Damien," she called into her comm unit. "What's your status?" "Eastern approach, encountering heavy resistance." His voice carried the controlled fury of an alpha protecting his territory. "They've got military-grade weapons and at least 6 wolves in defensive positions." Through the chaos of gunfire and tactical movement, Isabella could hear Blackwood's voice continuing his broadcast from somewhere within the mansion, his polished rhetoric painting the very people trying to stop him as the terrorists he claimed to be fighting. "As you can see, the Werewolf terrorist organization has launched a coordinated assault on federal personnel and facilities. Their willingness to use violence against legitimate government authority proves everything I've been warning about." "Isabella." Thorne's voice cut through the communications chatter with Alpha Authority. "We need to end that broadcast before his narrative becomes accepted fact." "Working on it." Isabella sprinted toward the mansion's main entrance, using her enhanced speed to stay ahead of the tracking fire from concealed positions. "The transmission equipment is in the main structure, probably the conference room where he's staging the press conference." "Negative," a new voice interrupted. "Deputy Director Morris, coordinating the federal response from the command helicopter. Satellite analysis shows the broadcast originating from the building's top floor. He's in what appears to be a private office or communications center." Isabella changed direction, angling toward a section of the mansion where exterior architecture would provide climbing access to the upper floors. But as she moved, movement in her peripheral vision triggered every survival instinct she possessed. Marcus Blackwood himself emerged from a concealed position near the mansion's west wing, no longer bothering with human disguise. His wolf form was magnificent and terrifying, larger than any natural predator, with silver-black fur and eyes that burned with predatory intelligence. But he hadn't shifted completely. Instead, he'd achieved the hybrid state that only the most powerful alphas could maintain, combining human intellect with supernatural physicality. Isabella Rivera. His voice carried clearly across the battle-torn grounds, harmonics designed to freeze prey in place through pure terror. The daughter of a dead traitor, come to complete her father's work. Isabella stopped running and turned to face him, her weapon trained on center mass, but her posture projecting calm confidence instead of fear. Marcus Blackwood. The wannabe dictator who's about to learn what real consequences look like. Around them, the tactical battle continued. Gunfire, tactical communications, the controlled chaos of professional soldiers and supernatural predators engaged in lethal conflict. But for this moment, the broader war narrowed to 2 individuals who'd been circling each other for months. "Your father died believing he was protecting the supernatural community," Blackwood said, beginning to circle her with predatory patience. What he didn't understand is that protection sometimes requires unpleasant choices. "What he understood," Isabella replied, turning to keep him in sight while maintaining position near potential cover, "is that monsters like you use noble language to justify monstrous actions." Blackwood's laugh was pure alpha dominance, designed to break the spirit of lesser wolves. "Monsters? My dear girl, I am evolution. I am the future of our species. Your father was a relic who couldn't accept that werewolves were meant to rule, not hide. And yet," Isabella said conversationally, "here you are, hiding behind lies and manipulation instead of proving your supposed superiority honestly." The insult hit home. Blackwood's circling stopped as his hybrid features shifted towards something more purely predatory. "Perhaps it's time for a more direct demonstration." He lunged with inhuman speed, claws extended, jaws capable of crushing bone. But Isabella had been preparing for this moment since the day she'd found her father's body, and she moved with the fluid precision of someone who'd learned to fight monsters by becoming something monstrous herself. Her first shot took him in the shoulder, the silver core bullet spinning him sideways, but not dropping him. Her second shot went wide as he recovered faster than humanly possible, his claws raking across her tactical vest and drawing lines of fire across her ribs. They crashed together in a tangle of violence and deadly grace, Isabella's human-trained combat skills pitted against Blackwood's supernatural strength and speed. He was stronger, faster, and more experienced in this kind of combat. But she was smarter, more desperate, and fighting for something beyond personal survival. "You killed my father," she gasped, driving her tactical knife toward his throat and being forced to settle for a shallow cut across his collarbone. "You destroyed innocent families. You betrayed everything our community stands for." "Your father was weak," Blackwood snarled, his claws catching her jacket and tearing it away to reveal the scarred flesh beneath. "Just like you. Just like all the humans who think they can stand against true predators." Isabella's answering smile was pure human cunning. "The funny thing about true predators, Marcus? They usually hunt alone." Blackwood's enhanced senses caught the warning too late. Damien hit him from the side like a guided missile, his own alpha strength focused into a tackle that sent all three of them rolling across the manicured lawn in a blur of violence and fury. When they separated, Blackwood found himself facing not one opponent but two, and the bond between them sang with a kind of partnership that made apex predators into legends. "Isabella," Damien said quietly, not taking his eyes off Blackwood, "are you injured?" "Nothing that won't heal." She checked her weapons, her movements fluid despite the fresh wounds across her ribs. "But I'm getting tired of this conversation." Blackwood looked between them, his predatory intelligence finally recognizing the truth that had been building throughout their confrontation. "You're mated. The bond. I can send it on both of you." "We are," Damien confirmed, his voice carrying the absolute certainty of an alpha who'd found his perfect match. "Which means threatening her was the last mistake you'll ever make." What followed wasn't really a fight. It was an execution carried out by two perfectly matched predators who'd learned to hunt as a single, lethal entity. Isabella's tactical training and enhanced reflexes created openings that Damien's alpha strength exploited with devastating efficiency. Her human intelligence anticipated Blackwood's supernatural responses, while his wolf instincts protected her from counterattacks she couldn't see coming. They moved together like dancers who'd rehearsed the steps for years, each action flowing seamlessly into the next, each strike building toward an inevitable conclusion. When it ended, Marcus Blackwood lay broken on the grounds of his own estate, his breath coming in ragged gasps as his hybrid form struggled to heal wounds that would have killed any ordinary wolf. "It's over," Isabella said quietly, her weapon trained on his head while Damien secured his arms with restraints designed for supernatural prisoners. "No," Blackwood whispered, his voice carrying the desperate fury of someone who'd lost everything. "You don't understand what you've done. The exposure, the revelation. It can't be undone. The human world knows about us now. The fear, the hatred, the war that's coming will be handled by people who actually care about both communities," Damien interrupted. "Not megalomaniacs who think terror and manipulation are tools of leadership." Around them, the tactical battle was winding down as Blackwood's remaining loyalists realized their leader had fallen. Federal agents and council enforcers were securing the compound, gathering evidence, and taking into custody the last members of the conspiracy that had threatened both human and supernatural society. "Isabella," Thorne's voice came through their comm units, "the broadcast has been terminated. Deputy Director Morris is coordinating with media outlets to provide accurate information about the situation." "And the other raids?" she asked. "Successful across all target locations. 17 conspirators in custody, financial assets frozen, and enough evidence to ensure they'll never threaten either community again." Isabella looked at Damien, seeing her own exhausted satisfaction reflected in his steel-gray eyes. They'd done it. They'd stopped the conspiracy, saved both their communities, and somehow managed to survive the most dangerous 48 hours of their lives. "So," she said conversationally, "what happens now?" Damien's smile was pure alpha confidence mixed with something softer, warmer, and infinitely more dangerous to her carefully maintained emotional defenses. "Now we have a choice to make." "Which is?" We can go back to our separate lives, you to your analytical work, me to rebuilding my corporate empire in a world where supernatural existence is public knowledge. His voice carried the weight of absolute sincerity. Or we can acknowledge what's been building between us since the moment you walked into my office. Isabella studied his face, seeing the vulnerability beneath his alpha authority, the hope beneath his predatory confidence. And if I choose the second option? Then you become my mate, my partner, my equal in every way that matters. Damien stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. You help me rebuild not just a business empire, but a new model for supernatural leadership. You become the Luna to my Alpha, and together we help create the world we both want to live in. Isabella's answer was to drop her weapons, reach up to cup his face in her hands, and kiss him with the fierce joy of a predator who'd found her perfect hunting partner. The kiss was fire and promise, dominance and submission, the claiming of mates who'd been tested in battle and found themselves perfectly matched. Around them, federal agents and council enforcers tactfully averted their eyes as two apex predators celebrated their victory in the most primal way possible. When they finally broke apart, Isabella's smile was radiant enough to light the darkening sky. I claim you, Damien Steele, she said formally, using the ancient words that bound Alpha to mate. In pack law, in human law, and in the sight of both our communities. I claim you, Isabella Rivera, he replied, his voice carrying harmonics that made every wolf within hearing distance acknowledge the bond. My mate, my Luna, my equal in all things. As the sun set over the wreckage of Marcus Blackwood's empire, two predators who'd saved the world began planning the future they would build together. Chapter 9, Empire Reborn. 3 months after the fall of Marcus Blackwood's conspiracy, the 42nd floor of Steele Industries had been transformed from a monument to corporate power into something far more revolutionary, the headquarters of the North American Supernatural Human Cooperation Initiative. Isabella stood before floor-to-ceiling windows that now looked out over a Manhattan that had fundamentally changed. Digital billboards displayed public service announcements about supernatural integration. News crawls reported on the establishment of the Department of Supernatural Affairs, and the streets below hummed with the energy of two species learning to coexist openly for the first time in centuries. The congressional hearings are going better than expected, she reported to Damien, who was reviewing architectural plans for what would become the first integrated supernatural human business complex in North America. Senator Harrison's committee has approved the legal framework for supernatural citizenship, and the Supreme Court agreed to fast-track challenges to discriminatory legislation. And the resistance movements? Isabella's expression darkened slightly. 14 human supremacist groups have formed in the past month, but they're disorganized and largely ineffective. More concerning are the 3 werewolf separatist factions that want complete independence from human society. Damien set aside the blueprints and moved to join her at the window, his presence still sending electricity racing along her nerve endings even after months of mating bond development. Old habits. Some of our kind have been hiding for so long that they can't imagine any other way of life. And some humans have been believing they were the apex species for so long that they can't accept evidence to the contrary. Isabella leaned into his warmth, drawing comfort from their bond while her analytical mind continued processing the challenges ahead. But Deputy Director Morris thinks we're past the critical period. Public opinion polls show growing acceptance of supernatural integration, especially after the Blackwood revelations proved that transparency serves everyone's interests. Speaking of Morris, Damien said, his voice carrying the satisfied tone of someone whose strategic planning had paid off perfectly, she called this morning. The president wants to meet with us next week. Isabella turned in his arms, studying his expression. Official meeting or unofficial consultation? Both. Apparently, we're being considered for senior positions in the new Department of Supernatural Affairs. Damien's smile was pure alpha satisfaction. It seems that successfully preventing a supernatural war while exposing the largest domestic conspiracy in American history has certain career advantages. And are we interested in government service? We're interested in making sure the world we helped create doesn't collapse into chaos because politicians think they can regulate supernatural society without understanding it. His hands settled on her waist, thumbs tracing the elegant line of her hip bones through the silk dress that had replaced her tactical gear. Besides, someone needs to ensure that the integration process serves both communities instead of just creating new opportunities for exploitation. Isabella's smile was answer enough, but before she could respond, the elevator chimed to announce an arrival. The doors opened to reveal Alexander Thorne, whose presence still commanded automatic respect even in the casual atmosphere of the reformed steel industries. "First Alpha," Damien said formally, though his posture remained relaxed. "I wasn't expecting you until this afternoon. Plans change." Thorne's expression was unreadable as he approached, but Isabella caught the subtle sense that suggested satisfaction mixed with something that might have been anticipation. "I have news that couldn't wait for scheduled meetings." "Good news or challenging news?" Isabella asked. "Both." Thorne's smile was predatory approval. "The Council of Alphas has voted unanimously to establish a new position, Director of Human Supernatural Relations, with authority over integration policy, dispute resolution, and strategic planning for both communities." Damien straightened, recognizing the implications immediately. That's a level of authority that's never existed before. Because it's never been needed before. But the world has changed, and our institutions must change with it. Thorne's gaze shifted between them, measuring their responses. The position requires someone with proven leadership ability, demonstrated commitment to both communities, and the kind of partnership that can bridge species differences. "Someone like..." Isabella prompted, though she was beginning to suspect where this conversation was leading. "Someone like a mated pair who've already proven they can save both communities when the stakes are highest." Thorne's smile was pure alpha satisfaction. "Alpha Damien Steele and Luna Isabella Rivera Steele, if you're willing to accept the responsibility." The office fell silent except for the distant hum of Manhattan traffic and the soft whisper of climate control systems. Isabella felt Damien's presence through their mating bond, his careful consideration, his growing excitement, his absolute certainty that this was exactly the kind of challenge they'd been built to handle. "What would the position entail?" she asked practically. "Everything," Thorne replied. "Establishing integration protocols, mediating disputes between human and supernatural authorities, coordinating with international supernatural communities, developing legal frameworks that protect both species, essentially, building the foundation for a new kind of society." "And the authority to make it work?" Damien asked. "Unprecedented. Direct access to both human and supernatural leadership, budget allocation for integration programs, the ability to authorize joint operations when necessary." Thorne's expression grew serious. "It won't be easy. You'll face resistance from traditionalists on both sides, political pressure from multiple governments, and the constant challenge of balancing competing interests." Isabella and Damien exchanged glances, one of those moments of silent communication that had become second nature since their mating bond had fully developed. In his steel-gray eyes, she saw the same excitement she felt, the same recognition that this was exactly the kind of work they'd been preparing for their entire lives. "We accept," she said simply. "Unanimously," Damien added. "When do we start?" Thorne's laugh was pure predatory satisfaction. "You already have. Congratulations, Director Steele and Deputy Director Rivera Steele. Try not to let the responsibility go to your heads." As Thorne departed to coordinate the announcement with both human and supernatural media outlets, Isabella found herself pressed against the floor-to-ceiling windows with Damien's body heat warming her back and his arms creating a protective cage around her. "Any regrets?" he murmured against her ear, his voice carrying undertones that made her wolf heritage sing with contentment. "About accepting a position that will probably consume the next decade of our lives while making us targets for every extremist group on 2 continents." Isabella leaned back against his chest, drawing strength from their bond. "Not a single one." "Good." His lips found the sensitive spot where her neck met her shoulder, and she shivered as his canines grazed her skin. "Because I have plans for our new empire." "Our empire?" "What we're building together," The integration programs, the legal frameworks, the new model of supernatural human cooperation. Damien turned her in his arms so she could see the vision burning in his eyes. It's going to be our legacy, Isabella. Not just a business empire or a political achievement, but something that changes the world permanently. Isabella's smile was radiant with shared ambition and perfect understanding. In that case, Alpha Steele, we'd better get started. Actually, Damien said, his expression shifting to something more intimate, more personally significant. There's one more piece of empire building we need to address first. Which is? Instead of answering, he moved to his desk and withdrew a small velvet box that made Isabella's enhanced senses detect the distinctive scent of rare metals and precious stones. When he opened it, the ring inside caught the afternoon sunlight and threw rainbows across the office walls, a masterpiece of white gold and diamonds that somehow managed to be both elegantly feminine and strong enough to survive the kind of life they were building together. Isabella Rivera, he said formally, dropping to one knee in a gesture that was both traditionally human and utterly sincere. You've already claimed me as your maid in Pack Law. Will you also marry me in human law so that both our communities can celebrate the bond that's going to help reshape the world? Isabella stared at the ring, at the man offering it, at the future spreading out before them like an infinite horizon of possibility and challenge. When she spoke, her voice carried the absolute certainty of someone who'd found her perfect hunting partner, her ideal mate, her equal in every way that mattered. Yes, she said simply. To all of it. The marriage, the empire, the challenges, the future we're going to build together. Her smile was pure joy mixed with predatory anticipation. But first, Alpha Steele, you need to kiss me properly. He surged to his feet and claimed her mouth with the fierce possessiveness of an alpha who'd found his Luna, the tender devotion of a man who'd found his perfect match, and the wild joy of a predator who discovered that the best hunts were the ones you shared with someone who could match your every move. Outside the windows, Manhattan hummed with the energy of two species learning to coexist. Inside the office that had once been a monument to corporate power and was now the headquarters of a new kind of empire, two predators who'd saved the world began planning the future they would build together. And in the distance, barely audible over the sounds of the city, the howl of wolves celebrating the mating of their alpha carried on the wind, a song of victory, of belonging, and of the kind of love that could reshape the world. Chapter 10. Blood Moon Rising. 6 months after their engagement, the rooftop terrace of Steele Industries had been transformed into something unprecedented, a wedding venue that bridged two worlds, two species, and two very different traditions of celebrating eternal bonds. The ceremony was scheduled to begin at sunset, when the rising blood moon would provide the perfect backdrop for a mating that had already become legend among both human and supernatural communities. But as Isabella stood before a mirror in the penthouse's master bedroom, adjusting the final details of a dress that somehow managed to be both elegant enough for human sensibilities and practical enough for werewolf traditions, she felt the familiar tingle of enhanced senses, detecting approaching danger. Damien, she called through their bond, the mental connection that had grown stronger every day since their claiming. We have a problem. His response came immediately, tinged with the controlled alertness of an alpha on high alert. I feel it too. Multiple unknowns approaching from the south, moving with coordination that suggests professional training. Isabella moved to the window, her wedding dress rustling against marble floors as she peered through reinforced glass toward the streets below. What she saw made her blood run cold. Black SUVs moving in tactical formation, their occupants carrying the distinctive energy signatures of enhanced humans. Not werewolves, she reported. But not entirely human either. Someone's been busy with genetic modification. Blackwood's contingency plan. Damien growled through their bond. He always was too paranoid to put all his eggs in one basket. The rooftop terrace was already filling with guests, an unprecedented gathering of human dignitaries, supernatural leaders, federal officials, and international observers who'd come to witness the first publicly celebrated human-werewolf mating in modern history. Deputy Director Morris stood near the altar beside Alexander Thorne, their presence symbolizing the cooperation that had emerged from the ashes of Blackwood's conspiracy. But now that gathering represented the perfect target for anyone seeking to destroy the fragile peace between the communities. "How many?" Isabella asked, already moving toward the tactical gear she'd insisted on keeping readily available despite the romantic nature of the evening. 12 vehicles, approximately 40 personnel, weapons signatures consistent with military-grade hardware. Damien's voice carried the deadly calm of an alpha preparing to defend his territory. "Blake's security teams are moving to intercept, but they're outnumbered." Isabella's smile was sharp enough to cut glass as she reached for the concealed weapons cache behind her vanity mirror. "Then it's a good thing we invited so many dangerous friends to our wedding." The first explosion came from the building's parking garage, a carefully placed charge designed to disable the elevators and trap the wedding guests on the rooftop. But the attackers had made one critical error in their intelligence gathering. They'd assumed that a werewolf wedding would follow human conventions of helplessness and panic. Instead, the sound of distant gunfire triggered responses that were anything but conventional. Alexander Thorne's human facade melted away to reveal the apex predator beneath, silver hair flowing, eyes blazing with centuries of accumulated authority, his presence alone enough to make every wolf on the terrace fall into military formation. Deputy Director Morris drew a service weapon that looked like it could stop a charging rhino while simultaneously coordinating with federal backup through her concealed communications gear. And scattered throughout the crowd, Isabella realized with predatory satisfaction, were nearly 24 council enforcers who'd been attending the ceremony in formal dress that concealed enough weaponry to fight a small war. "Ladies and gentlemen," Thorne's voice carried clearly across the terrace, his alpha harmonics cutting through the chaos with supernatural authority. "It appears our celebration has attracted some uninvited guests. I suggest we show them the traditional werewolf hospitality." What followed was the most elegant massacre in the history of Manhattan. Isabella burst onto the rooftop terrace like an avenging angel in white silk and tactical lace, her wedding dress modified with hidden armor and weapon concealment that turned bridal elegance into lethal functionality. She moved through the attacking forces with the fluid grace of someone who'd learned to dance with death, each strike flowing seamlessly into the next as she carved a path toward the primary threat. Damien met her in the center of the chaos, his formal tuxedo torn and bloodstained but his alpha presence burning bright as a beacon of supernatural authority. Together, they fought with the perfect synchronization of mates who'd learned to hunt as a single entity, their bond allowing them to anticipate each other's movements and cover each other's vulnerabilities with devastating efficiency. "Behind you," Isabella called, spinning to place 3 rounds center mass into an enhanced soldier who'd been attempting to flank her mate. "Roof access," Damien responded, his enhanced senses tracking additional threats. "They've got snipers on the adjacent buildings." Around them, the wedding guests had transformed into something that would have given the attackers nightmares if they'd lived long enough to have them. Federal agents and council enforcers worked together with military precision, their combined firepower turning the rooftop into a killing field for anyone stupid enough to threaten a werewolf mating ceremony. "Isabella," Deputy Director Morris's voice cut through the gunfire. "We've got incoming aircraft, 3 helicopters moving in from the east." Isabella looked up to see military-style aircraft approaching fast, their weapon systems already spinning up for attack runs that would turn the entire rooftop into a crater. But even as her tactical mind calculated impossible odds, she felt Damien's presence through their bond. Calm, confident, absolutely certain that they would survive this together. "Trust me," he said quietly, his voice carrying clearly despite the chaos around them. Isabella's answer was to press her back against his, weapon raised toward the approaching aircraft, her body language projecting complete faith in whatever plan he was formulating. Damien's howl split the night air, not the call of a single wolf, but the harmonic cry of an alpha summoning his entire pack to war. The response was immediate and overwhelming. From buildings throughout Manhattan, answering howls rose like a symphony of supernatural fury. Werewolves who'd been attending the ceremony in human form released their carefully maintained disguises, revealing the predators beneath. Federal agents who'd been coordinating discreet security suddenly found themselves backed by enough supernatural firepower to take on a small army. And from the darkness beyond the city lights, shadows began to move with purpose that spoke of pack coordination and military precision. The first attacking helicopter never had a chance to fire. It simply disintegrated in midair as something moving too fast for human eyes to track tore through its engine compartment. The second aircraft managed to get off a burst of machine gun fire before meeting the same fate, its wreckage raining down into the East River in pieces too small to identify. The third helicopter pilot was smart enough to retreat. What the hell was that? Morris demanded, her weapon still trained on potential threats even as the immediate danger passed. That, Thorne said with predatory satisfaction, was the Manhattan Shadow Pack responding to their Alpha's call. Apparently, Damien's territorial claims extend further than most people realized. Isabella stared at her mate with growing appreciation and just a hint of awe. How many? 43 wolves scattered throughout the city, all sworn to protect this territory and everyone in it. Damien's smile was pure alpha confidence. I may have mentioned our engagement to a few local pack leaders over the past few months. A few? All of them. Every alpha from Boston to Washington, D.C. has sworn alliance to our mating bond. His expression grew serious. The supernatural community has invested too much in our success to let anyone destroy it now. As federal cleanup crews arrived to secure the area and process the aftermath of what would become known as the Wedding Night Massacre, Isabella found herself pressed against the rooftop's safety railing with Damien's arms around her and the blood moon rising over a Manhattan that had just witnessed the birth of a new kind of power. So, she said conversationally, smoothing her torn wedding dress with hands that still trembled slightly from combat adrenaline, do you think we can still have the ceremony? Damien's laugh was pure joy mixed with predatory satisfaction. My dear Luna, after a display like that, I think every supernatural leader in North America is going to insist on witnessing our mating bond. And the human authorities? Deputy Director Morris just told me that the president wants to officiate personally. His smile was radiant with triumph and perfect contentment. Apparently, successfully defending a wedding reception against enhanced military forces while coordinating with supernatural allies has certain diplomatic advantages. Isabella's answering smile was brilliant enough to compete with the blood moon. In that case, Alpha Steele, I believe you owe me a proper wedding. I believe you're right. Damien cupped her face in hands that were gentle despite having been dealing death only minutes before. Isabella Rivera, will you marry me under the blood moon, in the sight of both our communities, with the understanding that our bond represents something entirely new in the world? I will, she said simply, with the understanding that our empire is just beginning. As Alexander Thorne called for order and Deputy Director Morris coordinated with rapidly arriving federal officials to ensure the ceremony could proceed, two predators who'd saved the world prepared to claim each other officially under a moon that had witnessed the birth of legends. The wedding that followed was unlike anything in recorded history, part human ceremony, part werewolf claiming ritual, part diplomatic summit, and part celebration of a new kind of power that bridged species lines with bonds stronger than politics or fear. When it was over, when the vows had been spoken and the claiming bites exchanged, and the blood moon had blessed their union with its ancient light, Damien and Isabella Steele stood together on the edge of an empire that would reshape both their communities forever. Ready for the honeymoon? Damien asked, his voice warm with promise and wild with the joy of a predator who'd found his perfect hunting partner. Isabella's smile was answer enough, but her words carried the weight of shared ambition and perfect understanding, ready for everything that comes after. Chapter 11. Legacy of Power. 2 years after the blood moon wedding that had redefined supernatural human relations, the penthouse suite of the newly constructed Steele Rivera Integration Center commanded a view of a Manhattan that bore little resemblance to the city that had existed before Marcus Blackwood's conspiracy was exposed. Isabella stood before floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over a skyline dotted with buildings designed to accommodate both human and supernatural occupants, structures with reinforced foundations for werewolf strength, soundproofing for enhanced hearing, and architectural elements that honored both species' aesthetic preferences. The integration hadn't been seamless, but it had been successful enough that the violent resistance movements of the early months had largely faded into memory. The quarterly integration reports, Damien said, emerging from their shared office with a tablet displaying data that would have been impossible to collect just 3 years earlier. Supernatural human business partnerships are up 47%. Integration housing applications have exceeded capacity in 12 major cities, and the joint law enforcement programs have reduced cross-species crime by 63%. And the resistance movements? Isabella asked, though her enhanced senses had already detected the satisfaction in his voice that suggested good news. Down to 3 active cells, all monitored by joint federal supernatural intelligence operations. Damien moved to join her at the window, his presence still sending electricity through their mating bond despite 2 years of marriage. Deputy Director Morris thinks we'll have the last holdouts neutralized within 6 months. Isabella leaned into his warmth, drawing comfort from their bond while her analytical mind processed the implications of their success. It's working. Against every prediction, every expert analysis, every dire warning about species integration, it's actually working. Because we made it work. Damien's arms settled around her waist, his hands coming to rest on the gentle swell of her abdomen that had become noticeable only in the past few weeks. Because we refused to accept that 2 intelligent species couldn't learn to coexist. And because, Isabella added with a smile that carried both satisfaction and anticipation, we're about to prove that the future belongs to the next generation. The pregnancy had been confirmed just a month earlier, though both of them had suspected for weeks. Half-human, half-werewolf children were rare but not unknown, and the medical team at the Integration Center had assured them that their particular genetic combination suggested a child who would inherit the best qualities of both species. Any regrets? Damien asked, his voice carrying the gentle teasing that had become one of their private languages. About creating a new model of supernatural leadership, revolutionizing interspecies relations, and building an empire that spans both communities while probably bringing our child into a world that's still figuring out how to handle genetic diversity. Isabella's smile was radiant with contentment. Not a single one. Before Damien could respond, the soft chime of their private elevator announced an arrival. The doors opened to reveal Alexander Thorne, whose presence still commanded automatic respect even in the casual atmosphere of their integrated headquarters. Director Steele, Deputy Director Rivera Steele, he said formally, though his expression carried the warmth of someone who'd watched them grow from controversial rebels into established leaders. I have news that requires immediate attention. Good news or challenging news? Isabella asked, settling into one of the leather chairs that had been designed to accommodate both human and supernatural physiology. Both. Thorne's smile carried predatory satisfaction, mixed with something that might have been anticipation. The International Council of Supernatural Leaders has reached a unanimous decision regarding the North American integration model. Damien straightened, recognizing the significance immediately. They want to expand it. They want to implement it globally. Every major supernatural community from Europe to Asia to Australia has requested assistance in establishing their own integration programs. Thorne's expression grew serious. Which means the work you've begun here needs to be scaled up exponentially. Isabella felt her pulse quicken with the kind of excitement that came from recognizing a challenge perfectly suited to her particular talents. What kind of assistance are they requesting? Everything. Advisory services, implementation support, legal framework development, diplomatic coordination between human and supernatural governments. Thorne moved to the window, studying the transformed Manhattan skyline. Essentially, they want you to export your revolution to the rest of the world. That's... Damien paused, calculating the magnitude of what Thorne was proposing. That's not a job. That's a complete restructuring of global supernatural society. Yes, Thorne agreed. It is. Which is why the International Council has authorized the creation of a new position, Director of Global Supernatural Human Integration, with authority over policy development, diplomatic coordination, and strategic planning for every supernatural community on the planet. The office fell silent except for the distant hum of Manhattan traffic and the soft whisper of climate control systems. Isabella felt Damien's presence through their mating bond, his careful consideration, his growing excitement, his absolute certainty that this was exactly the kind of challenge they'd been preparing for their entire lives. The position would require extensive travel, she said practically. Months away from home, dealing with political systems and cultural contexts we don't fully understand. And the authority to reshape supernatural society on a global scale, Damien added. The opportunity to ensure that what we've built here becomes the foundation for worldwide change instead of remaining an isolated experiment. There's one other consideration, Thorne said quietly. The position comes with certain protections. Official recognition by human governments, diplomatic immunity, and the kind of international authority that would make it very difficult for anyone to threaten your family. His gaze shifted meaningfully to Isabella's abdomen, and she realized that their pregnancy wasn't as private as they'd thought. "How long have you known?" she asked. "Enhanced senses, remember? I could detect the hormonal changes weeks ago." Thorne's smile was genuine warmth. "Congratulations, by the way. Your child will be born into a world that's fundamentally different from the one either of you grew up in." Isabella and Damien exchanged glances, one of those moments of silent communication that had become second nature since their mating bond had fully developed. In his steel-gray eyes, she saw the same excitement she felt, the same recognition that this was exactly the kind of legacy they wanted to build for their children. "We accept," she said simply. "Unanimously," Damien added. "When do we start?" Thorne's laugh was pure predatory satisfaction. "Next week. The European Council has requested an emergency consultation regarding integration challenges in the Nordic countries, and the Asian Federation wants strategic planning support for urban supernatural communities." As Thorne departed to coordinate the announcement with international supernatural and human authorities, Isabella found herself pulled against Damien's chest, his arms creating a protective cage around both her and their unborn child. "Any second thoughts?" he murmured against her ear, his voice carrying undertones that made her wolf heritage sing with contentment. "About accepting a position that will probably consume the next decade of our lives while making us responsible for the integration of supernatural communities across 6 continents." Isabella leaned back against his strength, drawing comfort from their bond. "Not a single one."
Good.
His lips found the sensitive spot where her neck met her shoulder, and she shivered as his canines grazed her skin. "Because I have plans for our global empire." "Our empire?" "What we're building together, the integration programs, the diplomatic frameworks, the new model of supernatural human cooperation that's going to reshape the entire world." Damien turned her in his arms so she could see the vision burning in his eyes. "It's going to be our legacy, Isabella. Not just for us, but for our children and every generation that comes after." Isabella's smile was radiant with shared ambition and perfect understanding. "In that case, Director Steele, we'd better get started changing the world." "Actually," Damien said, his expression shifting to something more intimate, more personally significant, "there's one more piece of empire building we need to address first." "Which is?" Instead of answering, he dropped to one knee and placed his hands gently on her abdomen, his alpha presence projecting protection and devotion that made their mating bond sing with harmonic resonance. "Hello, little one," he said softly, his voice carrying the ancient words that werewolf fathers had spoken to their unborn children for generations. "Your mother and I are about to change the world. When you're old enough to understand, we'll teach you how to change it even more." Isabella's hands covered his, and through their bond, she felt his absolute certainty that their child would inherit not just their genetic gifts, but their shared commitment to building something better than what they'd found. "What do you think?" she asked quietly. "Boy or girl? Does it matter?" Damien's smile was pure joy mixed with predatory anticipation. "Either way, they're going to be the most dangerous predator in whatever room they enter." Isabella's laugh bubbled up, wild and joyous and absolutely fearless. Just like their parents. Outside the windows, Manhattan hummed with the energy of 2 species who'd learned to coexist and thrive together. Inside the office that had become the headquarters of a global revolution, two predators who'd saved the world began planning the future they would build for their children. And in the distance, barely audible over the sounds of the integrated city, the howl of wolves celebrating new life carried on the wind, a song of victory, of belonging, and of the kind of love that could reshape the world for generations to come. Their empire was no longer just beginning. It was eternal. Chapter 12. Eternal Dominion. 5 years after accepting global leadership of supernatural human integration, the final integration reports from the African Federation, Damien said, emerging from the communications center with a tablet displaying data that represented years of careful diplomatic work. Supernatural human cooperation agreements have been signed by every major government on the continent, and the joint peacekeeping forces have reduced territorial conflicts by 87%. And the resistance movements? Isabella asked, though her enhanced senses had already detected the satisfaction in his voice that suggested the news was uniformly positive. Down to isolated cells with no significant operational capacity. Damien moved to join her at the observation deck's railing, where the lights of Geneva spread out below them like stars brought down to Earth. The last major holdout, the Human Purity Coalition, was neutralized 3 months ago when their own members realized that cooperation produced better results than conflict. Isabella smiled with the contentment of someone who'd seen their most ambitious visions become accepted reality. It's remarkable, isn't it? 5 years ago, most humans didn't even know werewolves existed. Now we have joint space programs, integrated medical research, and supernatural human couples adopting children from both communities. Because we proved that cooperation serves everyone's interests better than fear and isolation. Damien's arms settled around her waist, his hands coming to rest on the gentle swell of her abdomen where their second child was developing, a pregnancy that had been celebrated by both human and supernatural communities as a symbol of their integrated future. Their first child, Elena, had become something of a legend in her own right. At 4 years old, she possessed the intelligence of her human heritage, the enhanced senses of her werewolf genetics, and an uncanny ability to bridge cultural differences that made diplomats twice her age look like amateurs. She was currently sleeping in the headquarters' family quarters, exhausted from a day spent charming visiting dignitaries and unconsciously demonstrating that the future belonged to those who could move seamlessly between both worlds. Any regrets? Damien asked, his voice carrying the gentle teasing that had become one of their private languages. About revolutionizing global supernatural society, establishing permanent peace between two intelligent species, and building an empire that will probably last for centuries while raising children who represent the future of both our communities. Isabella leaned into his warmth, drawing strength from their mating bond. Not a single one. Before Damien could respond, the soft chime of the observation deck's private elevator announced an arrival. The doors opened to reveal Alexander Thorne, whose presence still commanded automatic respect even though his role had evolved from supernatural authority to elder statesman of the integrated world they'd created. Director Steele, Deputy Director Rivera Steele, he said formally, though his expression carried the warmth of someone who'd watched them grow from controversial rebels into the architects of a new age. I have news that you'll want to hear immediately. Good news or historically significant news? Isabella asked, recognizing the particular quality of anticipation in Thorne's bearing. Both. His smile carried predatory satisfaction, mixed with something that might have been awe. The United Nations Security Council has reached a unanimous decision regarding the Global Integration Accords. Damien straightened, understanding the implications immediately. They're making it permanent. More than permanent. They're elevating supernatural human integration from experimental policy to fundamental international law. Thorne moved to the observation deck's communication console, activating displays that showed voting results from every major government on the planet. Every member nation has ratified the Integration Charter, establishing your authority as the permanent foundation of global supernatural human relations. Isabella felt her pulse quicken with the kind of satisfaction that came from seeing a vision fully realized. What does that mean practically? It means that what you've built here isn't just policy anymore. It's the new structure of international society. Every government on Earth has agreed that supernatural human cooperation is not just beneficial, but essential for the continued development of both species. Thorne's expression grew serious. It also means that your children will inherit authority over a world that has been fundamentally reshaped by your vision. The observation deck fell silent except for the distant hum of Geneva's night traffic and the soft whisper of climate control systems designed to accommodate multiple species. Isabella felt Damien's presence through their mating bond, his careful pride, his growing understanding of what they'd accomplished, his absolute certainty that their legacy would endure for generations. There's one other development, Thorne continued, his voice carrying the weight of historical significance. The International Council has authorized the establishment of a new institution, the Global Academy for Integrated Leadership, designed to train the next generation of leaders who can navigate both human and supernatural society. A school for children like Elena, Isabella realized. And like the child you're carrying, and like every mixed heritage individual who will be born into the world you've created. Thorne's smile was genuine warmth, mixed with predatory satisfaction. Your children won't be anomalies or experiments. They'll be the architects of whatever comes next. Isabella and Damien exchanged glances, one of those moments of silent communication that had become second nature since their mating bond had developed into something that transcended individual identity. In his steel-gray eyes, she saw the same recognition she felt. They had succeeded beyond their wildest dreams, but more importantly, they had created something that would continue to grow and evolve long after they were gone. "When does the academy open?" she asked. "Next fall. The campus is being constructed in Manhattan, 3 blocks from the original steel industries building where you first met." Thorne's expression carried the satisfaction of someone who appreciated perfect symmetry. "Your daughter will be among the first students." As Thorne departed to coordinate the announcement with global media outlets, Isabella found herself pulled against Damien's chest, his arms creating a protective cage around both her and their unborn child while their first child slept peacefully in rooms designed to be safe for the most powerful predators on Earth. "So," she said conversationally, "we've revolutionized global society, established permanent peace between 2 intelligent species, and created educational institutions that will train leaders for the next century. What do we do for an encore?" Damien's laugh was pure joy mixed with the kind of ambition that had driven them from the beginning. "We make sure it lasts. We build institutions strong enough to survive political changes, cultural shifts, and whatever challenges the next generation will face that we can't even imagine yet." "And personally?" "Personally," he said, turning her in his arms so she could see the vision burning in his eyes. "We raise our children to be better than us. Stronger, smarter, more capable of bridging differences and building consensus. We make sure that when Elena and her siblings take over our work, they're equipped to handle problems we never had to face." Isabella's smile was radiant with shared ambition and perfect understanding. "In that case, Alpha Steele, we'd better get started on the next phase of our empire." "Actually," Damien said, his expression shifting to something more intimate, more personally significant, "I think our empire is exactly where it needs to be." "Which is?" Instead of answering with words, he gestured toward the observation deck's displays, which showed real-time data from integration programs operating on every continent. Cities where humans and werewolves worked together in businesses that served both communities. Schools where children of multiple species learned together without considering differences as barriers. Governments where supernatural and human officials collaborated on policies that protected everyone's interests. "Everywhere," he said simply. "Our empire isn't a place or an organization. It's an idea that has become the foundation of how the world works. And that's the kind of legacy that lasts forever." Isabella looked out over Geneva, but through their bond, she could feel the presence of their global network. Integration centers in Manhattan and London and Tokyo, diplomatic missions in every major capital, families and communities and institutions that existed because they had refused to accept that 2 intelligent species couldn't learn to coexist. "Elena's going to think this is all perfectly normal," she said with sudden amusement. "She'll grow up in a world where supernatural human cooperation is just how things work. Which means she'll be free to build something even better." Damien's hands settled protectively over their unborn child. Whatever comes after integration, whatever problems or opportunities the next century brings, our children will be equipped to handle all of it. Isabella's laughter bubbled up, wild and joyous and absolutely fearless. Just like their parents. Outside the observation deck, Geneva hummed with the energy of a world that had learned to embrace diversity as strength rather than fear it as weakness. Inside the headquarters of the most successful social revolution in human history, two predators who had saved the world began planning the institutions that would serve their children's children. And in the distance, barely audible over the sounds of the integrated city, the howl of wolves celebrating new life carried on the wind, a song of victory, of belonging, and of the kind of love that could reshape the world for all the generations yet to come. Their empire was no longer just eternal. It was evolution itself. Blood and boardrooms. 25 years later, Isabella Rivera stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Global Integration Authority headquarters, watching the morning sun rise over a New York skyline that bore no resemblance to the city her parents had fought to transform a quarter-century earlier. At 29, she possessed her mother's analytical brilliance, her father's alpha presence, and something uniquely her own, the absolute certainty of someone who had never known a world where humans and werewolves were anything but partners in building the future. The communication device on her desk chimed with an incoming priority message from the Mars Colony Integration Project, humanity's first off-world settlement, where her younger brother Marcus was currently establishing protocols for supernatural human cooperation in space. The message was brief but significant. Phase 1 complete. Ready for expansion to the Jupiter stations. Elena smiled with the satisfaction of someone whose family had spent generations turning impossible dreams into accepted reality. Her parents had revolutionized Earth. Her generation was preparing to revolutionize the stars. Director Rivera Steele? Her assistant's voice carried the respectful efficiency of someone who worked for the most powerful integrated authority in human history. The delegation from the Centauri colony has arrived for the Interplanetary Cooperation Summit. Send them in, Elena replied, straightening the jacket that bore the insignia of an office that hadn't existed when her parents first met in a Manhattan boardroom. And remind them that we expect the same standards of integration they'll encounter on every human werewolf world. As the doors opened to admit representatives from humanity's newest frontier, Elena caught her reflection in the windows, her mother's dark eyes, her father's determined jaw, and the kind of presence that made both humans and werewolves instinctively recognize authority that had been earned rather than inherited. Her parents had built an empire that spanned a single world. Her generation was building one that would span the galaxy. And in the distance, barely audible over the sounds of an integrated civilization that now extended beyond the atmosphere, the howl of wolves preparing for the greatest hunt in their species' history carried on the solar wind, a song of victory, of belonging, and of the kind of love that could reshape entire star systems. The blood and boardrooms had become blood and spaceways. The empire was eternal, and it was just beginning. The end.